concerning wildlife is concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah, okay. Rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. It is Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. I'm quite sure it is Thursday. I've been saying all week for some reason I keep getting the day wrong. Yesterday I thought it was Wednesday, and it was. But at the beginning of the day I thought it was Tuesday. I sent a message to my daughter saying, "Happy Tuesday, darling." And she went, "It's Wednesday, Dad." I was like, "Oh, okay, sorry." I don't know why that is. You know, sometimes you just get discombobulated. It's like one day runs into the next. When you get up as early as I do, sometimes you're not even sure what month you're in. But here we are. It is definitely Thursday, the 5th of June. The sky looks pretty grey and miserable out there. We're told it's going to bucket down with rain a little bit later on, and it's almost as though it's a bank holiday weekend coming up, because the rain is going to fall, ladies and gentlemen, prodigiously between now and probably Sunday afternoon. Nevertheless, we will try and cheer you up this morning with all manner of wonderful things, including Rafe Heidel-Mancour, who's here to help me looking through the stories in the papers. We've got all sorts of things going on this morning. Once again, we will be running the line over this Labour government, which gets worse and worse and worse by the day. Front page of the Times says pensioners face tax hit for winter fuel U-turn. Rachel Reeves plans to recoup cash from the better off. So they basically admitted they got it wrong, even though they're pretending they didn't get it wrong. They're basically saying, oh yeah, the reason that we can now go back on taking winter fuel allowance away from pensioners is because we've got the economy in a much better place than it was back end of last year. Really? I don't think so. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, Rachel Reeves forced to drop net zero cuts. Apparently Keir Starmer has sided with mad Ed Miliband after the Chancellor tried to axe some of his key projects. Apparently Keir Starmer's worried about Ed Miliband. I mean, if you're worried about Ed Miliband, it's really time to take a chill pill and maybe take some time off. Battle lines drawn over immigration, it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. Keir Starmer's planning a legal crackdown on migrants exploiting the right to family life to avoid deportation. Really? Well, it's about time. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch pledges to revive the Rwanda-style scheme and ban illegal arrivals from claiming asylum. PMQs yesterday, Prime Minister's Questions, was quite lively, and for one of the first times ever, Kemi Badenoch actually landed quite a lot of punches on Keir Starmer, who ended up just stuttering and stammering away. We've actually got a clip that sounds exactly like that. But first up, have a listen to this.
It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
It's got to be said, the Tories were really, really excited about all of that. Also, of course, one of the big moments yesterday, Sarah Pochin, the new Reform Party MP, asked a question which Keir Starmer just didn't want to answer. The question was, why don't you ban the Burka? We're going to talk about that. It's 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to Morning Glory. We've got all the news that you will need, including a story on the front page of the Telegraph. The hackers have stolen 100,000 tax records after attacking HMRC. It's not clear exactly who those 100,000 people are, but apparently the tax authority is thought to have lost £47 million as a result of the hacking breach last year, with officials telling MPs that 0.2% of PAYE taxpayers with personal accounts were affected. About 100,000 people. First we've heard of it. It's strange, isn't it? Also, we'll be talking about Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. They had a conversation last night, apparently, on the telephone. And we'll also be telling you why we think the Holy Grail might actually be in St Albans. I'll leave that to your imagination for the moment. Rafe, very good morning to you. Good to see you. Quite a lot of action yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions. It was quite lively for a change. Let's have a look at some of the clips from it. Here's the first one. This is, of course, Kemi Badenoch finally actually cutting through. We've been waiting for a long time for her to actually do something quite positive. Here she is.
I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child benefit cap. He's talking about the Kremlin. He's saying everything he can to distract from the mess he is making of our economy. The OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public safe. Just as he's releasing more criminals onto the streets. His cabinet are squabbling with each other. They've said that they've lost control of the borders, but he still managed, Mr. Speaker, to find £30 billion to give away the Chagos Islands. This is total and utter chaos. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
The only advice, Mr. Speaker, she gets up on a Wednesday morning, scrolls through social media, never does anything. We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. And we're working in the US, and that will be coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Please. Let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
What did she opposes the US deal, she opposes the India deal, she opposes what we're doing with the EU, and she opposes Diego Garcia. That's a vital intelligence and strategic capability. Absolutely clear that legal uncertainty would compromise that capability in a very short time. No responsible Prime Minister would ever let that happen. We have secured the long-term basis for the base. That has been welcomed by, Mr. Speaker, welcomed by the US, NATO, Australia, New Zealand, India. They're our allies. It's been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. And into that column we have reform, presumably following Putin, and the Tories following reform.
This is earlier than normal. We do the live the day for Keir Starmer. Normally it takes till about 8 o'clock for him to put a tweet. That's his first live the day because he claims that China is against the Chagos deal, when of course they just came out last week and said they were very much in favour of it.
Well, it's a blatant lie, of course, because Mauritius, who he's handed over our sovereign territory to, Mauritius is in the pocket of China. China wants to have extreme influence there. China may also pressure Mauritius, because Mauritius has signed up to the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, which means they actually could easily pull pull the Diego Garcia deal and not allow us to have our missiles there if they want to, if China forces them to. That's one of many lies there. I mean, the idea that you know, India is a great deal, that his deal with the EU is a great deal, deal with America, these are terrible deals.
Well, apart from anything else, it was revealed pretty much yesterday over the steel tariffs that actually there is no deal with America. They haven't signed anything. They've only had, I mean, in their own words, it's an ambition rather than an actual promise of something that's going to happen.
And worse still, Trump has now come out and said you've got a deadline of 5 weeks. You know, you need to get to the table. So once again, it looks as if he's being bullied by another world leader, and he's so desperate to be seen after Rachel Reeves' disastrous, budget. Whatever deal he can get, however bad it is for Britain, so long as he can hold up a piece of paper and say I've done more than the Tories. I mean, he's selling us out geographically and financially.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem. And very interesting intervention from Lindsay Hoyle there, who's been under a sort of a cloud of his own, thanks to his island hopping in the Caribbean this week. £5,500 of public money spent on taking private planes between Montserrat and Antigua. Very nice if you can if you can do that sort of thing. But he actually said, you know, we want to hear the answer. We want to hear the Prime Minister, even if he's not actually answering the question. Because he hasn't. I mean, yesterday was a great example. He didn't answer any question at all that he was asked. And surely at some point somebody has to say, Prime Minister's question surely has to be about the Prime Minister answering the question that he's asked and not just evading it.
The British people deserve far better than this. We're in a real crisis. We need serious answers to serious questions. And what did he do during PMQs? She, Kemi Badenoch, one of her, every 6 weeks we get a good performance out of her. This was one of those times. She was on fire, asking real questions about lifting the cap on 2 children families. He came back saying, oh, you're a friend of Russia. A completely innocuous reference, actually, to something that the Russians said about her, accusing Ukraine of fighting a proxy war on behalf of the West. Had nothing to do with a serious question which the British people want to ask. How are you going to fund any potential lift on the 2-child cap?
But this is the problem, isn't it, for somebody like Keir Starmer? He immediately resorts to kind of, insults and ridiculous sort of playground conversations when he gets a bit rattled. And that's when he starts lying even more, and that's when he starts, losing the plot, because he doesn't seem to be able to handle somebody having a go at him. And when he sat there, as we were watching Kemi Badenoch there, having a go at him, skewering him rather well, he looked so uncomfortable, and he didn't look like a man that knew what to say in return.
Well, there's nothing he can say. I mean, the Labour Party is in free fall. This is a man who's supposed to be an experienced barrister, right? An experienced member of a prosecutor, and you can just see him withering under her fire there. I don't know how good he was in the actual intensity of a courtroom.
I think we've discovered over time, and I discovered this a few weeks ago, that in fact he didn't really do that much actual, advocacy in a court of law. What he was doing when he was head of the CPS was actually instructing other lawyers to go off and do battle on his behalf. He didn't actually do an awful lot of it himself.
Which explains why he's so mediocre and can't think on his feet, as we've seen time and again.
Exactly right. Let's have a look at a couple of other clips. One, as you mentioned, on the 2-child benefit cap. Check this out.
The government keep the 2-child benefit cap.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely determined that we will drive down child poverty. That's one of the proudest things of the last Labour government. That's why we've got a task force. That's why we've got a strategy, and we'll set out that strategy in due course. But we drive child poverty down. Under them, poverty always goes up.
I didn't ask him about a task force. I asked him if he will keep the 2-child benefit cap. And he doesn't know. It's just chaos and uncertainty. He has no details. He is briefing something and causing a lot of confusion to the people out there. But on that 2-child benefit cap, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell him this. I believe in family, but I also believe in fairness. Yes. On this side of the House, we believe that people on benefits should have to make the same choices on having children as everyone else. Yes. What does the Prime Minister believe?
Yes. Prime Minister. Speaker, I believe profoundly in driving down poverty and child poverty. That's why we'll put a strategy in place.
I believe in poverty. I believe in driving down poverty. I believe in driving down child poverty. I mean, he's like an automaton that just spouts, whatever, you can press a button and you get some kind of, instant policy, which doesn't mean anything. It's become a government of slogans, hasn't it? And actually not doing anything behind the slogan. Well,
it's also a party and a government that's completely discombobulated by reform. Reform have come out with this policy that they want to lift the cap on 2-child families. And I think the left wing of the Labour Party, of course, who are extremely angry because for all sorts of other cuts and things, they're calling for this as well. I think he knows it will play very badly. The Tories think the Reform Party have done a misstep here because actually, yes, the Reform Party needs to lean left on economics to get more people voting for it from the Labour wings. But what the policy people don't like is lifting the cap. Because what a lot of them think is it's going to people who are on the benefit system, who are taking advantage.
Although Nigel Farage, to be fair to him, was quite clear that that's not what he was intending to do, that he was talking about having an incentive for more people to have more children, but who were responsible parents, not those who would be likely to kind of be another drain on the state. So what he wanted to do was to try and encourage more people to have more kids, basically. I mean, and I think he was quite specific about saying it won't go to people who are on universal credit.
Yeah, but I think the message the public can take from that is essentially that it's going to go to end up. And that's the problem there.
That is the problem.
And it has to be said, you know, any country in the world that has adopted pro-natalist policies, Hungary has done more for pro-natalism than anywhere else, encouraging more births. It's had almost minimal effect. These policies, unfortunately, don't work.
Yeah, it is difficult to encourage people to have children when they don't really want to. I mean, that's the bottom line. And
well, when you've got a tiny apartment, tiny home, cost of living is so high. I mean, it's a drop in the ocean, unfortunately.
Yes, but what we do know is that the birth rate, of course, as it is falling in this country, is rising in other parts of the world. I think in places like Nigeria, the birth rate is at something like 5.0 for every couple who are married, whereas here it's below 2.0.
It's below replacement here. And I spoke to one of the world's top demographers last year, and he explained to me that actually immigrant communities, when they arrive in the country, all of them, with one exception, go down to the British population birth rate within 1 or 2 generations, except for Muslims are the only population that are increasing in size. And he said one of the other things, of course, is that with welfare programs, if you look at Scandinavia, the more multicultural a society becomes, the less willing people are to pay things like these welfare benefits, because it's human nature. People only want to pay benefits to people like themselves. So as Denmark and Sweden have had increased immigration, there's less support for a welfare system. And I think that may be one of the reasons why this policy of reforms may prove to be unpopular.
Because that is the problem here as well, isn't it? Because people come to this country from all sorts of other countries, partly because they know that they can get benefits, which in their own country they wouldn't get.
Exactly.
And that's why we're such a draw. Let's have a look at what the winter fuel payments exchange was all about, because that's another U-turn by Keir Starmer. But again, very unclear as to how they're going to pay for it and exactly who is going to be affected by it.
Mr. Speaker, 3 weeks ago, the winter fuel policy was set in stone. 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister U-turned. Today, the Chancellor is rushing her plans because she just realised when winter is. So on behalf of the pensioners who want to know, can the Prime Minister be clear with us here and now? How many of the 10 million people who lost their winter fuel payments will get it back?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm glad to see she's catching up with what happened 2 weeks ago. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the budget, we took the right decision to stabilise the economy because of the £22 billion black hole that they left. And the signs, we took the right decisions. The growth figures are up, the interest rates have been cut, and we got 3 trade deals. So we will look again, as I said 2 weeks ago, at the eligibility for winter fuel, and of course we'll set out how we pay for it. But because we've stabilised the economy, Mr. Speaker, we on this side are committed to the triple lock, and that increased pensions by over £400 this April. On their side, they say the triple lock is unsustainable, and I think her position is she wants to means test it.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister clearly has selective amnesia. I asked him 3 questions about the winter fuel payment 2 weeks ago, and he was floundering. The fact is, he hasn't answered the question I asked him. He hasn't answered the question I asked him. He can't tell us who will get the payments. All we see is U-turn after U-turn. His head must be spinning.
And once again, of course, more lies from Keir Starmer, talking about the 3 trade deals he's done, at least 2 of which are not trade deals, talking about, you know, oh, she's suddenly remembered something that happened 2 weeks ago. He still hasn't explained what the question asked him to explain, which is who's going to benefit from the U-turn and why he's decided to do it. And he's also hiding behind the fact that he can now afford to do it because the economy is in better shape than it was last year, which it isn't.
No, it's not. Yeah,
I mean, take your pick of the lies out of that one.
It's gone up by 1 millimetre millimetre the economy. It's hardly enough. Yeah, I mean, you could do a top 10 lies from just one PMQs. It seems with Keir Starmer this time around. And there you had, you know, laughing behind him, David Lammy seems to think he's got some stand-up comic in front of him.
Well, it's nice to see him in the country for a change. I mean, he's normally sort of shooting off in a private jet somewhere, isn't he?
But of course, the whole issue of the pension, you know, OAP U-turn just shows how actually inept this government is, how completely obvious it was going to be that this was going to backfire hugely. It's obviously a vote loser. We know, of course, pensioners vote for a far higher proportion than any other section of the population. And quite frankly, to go through all of that damage to yourself for £1.5 billion, I mean, for heaven's sake, there are 1 million foreign nationals claiming £7.5 billion on universal credit every year.
Exactly.
You know, we've got 15 billion in a decade for migrant hotels. There are clear areas where you can save the amount of 1.5 billion without actually, you know, putting it onto the backs of our poor.
Well, she announced yesterday, we'll talk about this after the break, but she announced yesterday £15 billion to be spent on, you know, Andy Burnham's pet project in Manchester, you know, the first electric carbon neutral, you know, transport link between one part of the city and another. You know, nobody cares at this point whether it's carbon-free or electric, but £15 billion is an awful lot of money. We are, of course, Morning Glory. It's 20 minutes past 6. Ray Parder-Mancour is here. Coming up, we're going to hear from Sarah Pochin, the new Reform MP, who asked a very, very difficult question that apparently everybody in the House of Commons thought was absolutely shocking. We'll get to that. Plus Rachel Reeves and what she said yesterday. And if you ever wanted to see a group of people standing behind a minister looking more and more uncomfortable, this is your chance. This is Talk.
The most disturbing element of this, I think, is the fact that this man was attacked by a knife-wielding maniac who stabbed him, and then as he was on the floor, he was kicked by a passing delivery driver. Those two individuals have not yet faced trial. I know they will do. But as yet, this one's been very much rushed through. Apparently the words are the more frightening thing. But even worse than that, the judge in this case said, we know that your protest was disorderly and likely to stir disordered behaviour because you were attacked twice.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On the app. On your mobile. The home of common sense. This is...
Good morning and welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:24. I'm Mike Graham and we are here, of course, for your delectation all the way through till 10 o'clock for glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 until 10. Good morning, Mike, says Jim. In the Netherlands, when I saw that clip of Rachel Reeves yesterday, I couldn't help but think that the workers standing behind her looked like they had turned up at the wake of a past colleague. On reflection, it may be the case, listening to the last rites of our beloved country. Well, I don't understand... Rafe, why they do this now. Every time we see Keir Starmer out and about in a factory, or we see Rachel Reeves out and about, she was in apparently a bus factory yesterday up in Rochdale, they put this sort of hapless crowd of people behind them, standing there, clearly looking as if they've been taken hostage and made to kind of look as if they're enthusiastic, and they never look enthusiastic.
No, and of course they don't do any polling beforehand. How many of the employees are actually on Labour's side? So you're a hostage to fortune yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't know what's going to go on behind you. I wonder whether the bosses on the other side just basically glaring at everyone to stay in line. But it's so hard to actually fake enthusiasm. I'm sure most of these people don't really care about the Labour Party's policies. No. One iota.
Well, it's hardly inspiring, is it? There's actually a great clip, which I'm about to show you, of a guy who's standing to Rachel Reeves' right. And if you pay close attention to his sort of body language, you can see that he would rather wish to be almost anywhere else other than listening to her.
And put simply, our plan, the central barrier to economic growth has been underinvestment. First, stability. So, reforming our pension system to over the first 10 years of the previous Conservative government, no matter where they grow up. And because I know, and thousands of pounds extra.
I mean, you can just see there's a bit of jumping going on there. We'll try and sort that out. But you can see the guy is completely and utterly nonplussed about being there. He's shifting from one foot to another. He's raising his eyebrows at one point. He's scratching his face. I mean, you can tell that he's literally been sort of press ganged into standing there.
Well, that could be any one of us standing behind her, I must say, although it looks also... He may have had a rough night the night before as well. But every time that I first heard of Rachel Reeves, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, and I remember thinking, that's the sort of voice you want to have if you're an insomniac. You know? Play that every evening and you'll go off to sleep.
I mean, if it wasn't for Keir Starmer, you'd be calling her the robot of the government.
Exactly,
but she actually... he actually makes her look almost human. Here she is announcing the U-turn on winter fuel.
I had to make decisions last year to restore sound public finances, and that involved a number of difficult decisions around welfare, taxation, and also public spending, including the decision to means test winter fuel payments, so only the poorest pensioners, those on pension credit, got it. But we have now put our public finances on a firmer footing. The economy is in a better shape, but we have also listened to the concerns that people had about the level of the means test. And so we will be making changes to that. They will be in place so that pensioners are paid this coming winter, and we'll announce the detail of that and the level of that as soon as we possibly can. But people should be in no doubt that the means test will increase and people will get, more people will get winter fuel payment this winter.
I mean, she says she's on firmer footing, but she's treading water here, you know?
We will be doing it at some point soon, but they'll definitely get it. According to The Guardian, which is supposed to be their cheerleader, chaos fears over return of winter fuel payments. Bereaved families of tens of thousands of dead pensioners could be pursued by tax officials to recoup winter fuel payments under a new system being explored by the Treasury. So apparently not only are they not actually sure how they're going to do this new means test, but they may be actually trying to recoup money from people who have passed on.
Yeah, absolutely.
What the hell is going on with that?
And, well, I mean, they're just so desperate now to try to find some way to make this work. Taxing the dead.
That's a new low, isn't it?
not well, we're only in the first year. Let's see what else is to come in the next couple of years.
First they kill them, and then they tax them after they die.
But even if they tax the dead, it's still not going to raise enough money to actually pay for all of this. And that's the thing. What they really... I mean, she loves to attack Liz Truss. She has made an unfunded pledge here. Yeah. That's exactly what she's done.
Yes. Exactly right. Now let's get to the meat of the matter, because this was the question, I suppose, that shocked the nation. And why it shocked the nation, I don't know, because it's a perfectly reasonable question. But Sarah Pochin, a very estimable character who's now become the 5th Reform MP, having won the Runcorn by-election from Mike Amesbury, the guy who thought it was a great idea to go around punching his constituents. Let's have a look at what she said to Keir Starmer yesterday.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, there's no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
Once again, Keir Starmer refusing to answer the question quite pointedly, saying, I'm not going to follow her lead on that. But could you believe the reaction of the House of Commons? The entire chamber, it was all like, oh, goodness me, why would somebody ask that terrible question? How is it a terrible question?
Yeah, and the implication is that somehow France and Belgium and Denmark are beyond the pale. These are advanced Western European
all countries
Democrats.
that Keir Starmer wants to cosy up to, by the way, in his new EU trade deal. Oh, but he apparently doesn't want to talk about that bit.
Well, look, as I've said on here many times, you know, the average British voter is to the right of the average Tory MP on immigration, but also on these sorts of cultural issues.
Right.
Even the Tory MPs are to the left of where the British voter is, where talk's viewers and listeners are as well. These are important questions to be had, and yes, we're at the point now where our culture is under threat from many, many different ways, and one of those, of course, is the lack of social cohesion in this country, and whether or not we should allow the burqa to be worn must be one of those questions which we should be unafraid, whatever your view is, we should be unafraid of openly discussing whether you're actually encouraging a segregated community to become essentially its own increasingly separated community.
Also, why the sort of sudden intake of breath? You know, I'm sick to death of these people who think that we can't discuss things. You know, we're all grown-ups, we're all grown up enough to be able to say, you know, either I think the burqa is a ludicrous and crazy and ridiculous look for anybody to wear. I see them, I was in Oxford Street yesterday, you see more people walking around wearing burqas in Oxford Street than you do in Dubai. You know, and that's a fact, because there are people in parts of the Arab world who understand that actually it's a subjugation and it's not something that women should be forced to do.
And so once again, the feminists...
Why can we not talk about it?
And once again, the feminists are silent about this. You know?
Very silent.
When it's women's free choice. When you're brought up in a culture of misogyny, you do end up actually adopting its things without even realising why you're doing it. And it is clearly an oppressive garment to be worn. But this is precisely why, this question is precisely why reform is ahead in the polls, ahead of the Tories, ahead of Labour, because the British public think this is a common sense question, and the reaction of our elites in Parliament just goes to show how disconnected they are.
Exactly.
And if Labour really wants to make inroads and take away some of that reform vote, it's going about it in entirely the wrong way.
Yeah, because they know that they can't go about it the right way, because they are intrinsically and sort of, you know, ridiculously wedded to this left-wing ideology which says that all foreign cultures are good, all immigration is good, all people who come from another country, particularly if they happen to have brown skin, must be good people. I mean, that's what they genuinely believe, and that's why we are where we are.
And also equally important, of course, is the fact that Labour is desperately afraid of the rise of the Muslim vote. Of course, we now have 4 Muslim vote MPs, and it's precisely these sorts of issues, I think, that they're fearful that it will lead to a collapse of their vote, which they're already hanging on by a thread in so many of the north of England constituencies, and it's issues like the burqa that would mobilise the Muslim vote to actually stop voting for the Labour Party, and there'll be decimation on not only on the council level but on a general election level. And that's one of the reasons we see, of course, the Labour Party so keen to actually create a new blasphemy law by the back door with an Islamophobia bill.
Because they only want to protect Islam. They don't want to protect Catholicism, they don't want to protect Christianity, they don't even want to protect Hinduism, they just want to protect Islam because they're frightened of it.
Yeah, well, as the chap who was
what
just...
sort of ridiculous notion is that?
As the chap who was just convicted for burning a Quran outside the Turkish embassy said, had I burnt the Bible outside Westminster Abbey, no one would have noticed.
Yes. My favourite sort of moment of all of that was on Kevin O'Sullivan's show when he had a guy write in, because the idea is apparently the Turkish dissident who wants to go on a British tour now, burning the Quran in all sorts of parts of north, south, east and west, and they were talking about whether he should join up with some kind of modern touring operation, and somebody actually sent in a note to Kevin saying, why doesn't he tour with Simon Le Bon, and they could call the tour Quran, which I thought was one of the greatest things ever. Anyway, 6:34, this is Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to a Morning Glory, 6:37. This from Alan in Merseyside. The guy on the right-hand side of Reeves is bored to death. He made my day, but it could have been worse. He could have been stood behind Starmer. Well, absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Well, he was useless, wasn't he, again yesterday? It was nice to see him finally floundering around. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. He's absolutely useless. And then they're all Rachel Reeves out. She looks dreadful. She looks like she's aged about 30 years older than she was when she first did a budget. Teeth stuck together. I got to put more money in people's pockets. I'm the Chancellor. I had to make difficult decisions because I'm the Chancellor. We will be investing 15 billion here and 16 billion there, and I'm the Chancellor. And the Tory government. It's awful. Oh, it's awful, Mike. It really is awful.
It really is awful. You've summed it up terribly well there, James. And it does all sound like this sort of cacophonous noise. It's almost like...
Well, it sounded like Zippy from Rainbow.
When you go to one of those country house hotels and they've got geese outside that sort of, guard the place. And that's what it sounds like. It's a little gaggle of geese just making noise and not actually saying anything at all. Absolutely extraordinary. We'll come back to some of the PMQ stuff because it is absolutely amazing how finally Kemi Badenoch seems to have actually got Keir Starmer to the point where he can't actually speak. Mr. Speaker. One story that caught my eye this morning, though, Rafe, which is off the off-piste, as it were, from the PMQ scenario. Britain took an extra 5 million sick days for mental health reasons last year after a surge in conditions including stress, anxiety and depression. Staff took a record 20.5 million days off in 2024, according to the Office for National Statistics. That's an extraordinarily high number, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's, 5 million more than the year prior to that. Now, I would have just thought that as every year from COVID goes down, that the number of mental health days and physical health days would go down. Quite the contrary. I think last year we had a discussion on a similar topic, and we found out that people under 25 take more sick days than people over 50.
Yes.
So there's problem here. There's a problem here. People are often taking sick days, which, for anxiety. People are getting diagnosed with ADHD. It seems like everyone's got ADHD now, and I think we have a real
and they're getting medicated for it as well.
And they're getting medicated for it. And of course, it's the public sector. The public sector have almost double the number of sick days, percentage-wise, as you get in the private sector.
But I think the private sector's also kind of been, it's been turned to some extent, where, if you talk to anybody who works in HR, as we used to call it, the business interruption department, they will say, well, of course, we've got to be more flexible with people. If somebody says that they're suffering from anxiety, they don't want to come into work, you have to kind of let them do it up to a point. Some of the private sector companies now are saying, look, you have to try and come into work at least 3 days a week into an office, but people who are still kind of holding off on that and going, oh, I'm a bit anxious, I don't really want to do that, they kind of have to let them get away with it.
Sure, but in the public sector, 16.4% more. Poor mental health appears to be more prevalent in the sector. 16.4% of absences in the public sector were due to mental health. Only 6% in the private sector. And we know that the public sector is not more stressful than the private sector. It's a much more comfortable lifestyle. It's more secure. You've got better benefits and so forth. So why, of course, is it so much higher? It's because I think of the culture within the public sector that facilitates that sort of thing. In the private sector, you can't get away with stuff as much as you can in the public sector.
Absolutely
and
true.
There's a lot of that going on, and I think there'll be, if you really want to forget cutting the fuel allowance to pensioners, there's huge savings that can be made if you get a clamp down on the trade in mental health sickness.
Definitely. Well, we've already seen, even in the first early stages of the Doge Department of Reform, going into various different councils. They're going into Kent Council. They've found some things at Sheffield already. There's no question that they will find wastes of money, the like of which we've never seen. And somebody said on Twitter yesterday, this could be the biggest public sector scandal of all time, once you start lifting up the stones and realising what's underneath them.
Oh, yeah, no. The amount of waste that you're going to find in the public sector, and I think it will take someone like Reform to actually have the kahunas to tackle that, because I think governments have been too scared to do it because of what will happen with the unions, but it's a battle that's long overdue.
Absolutely right. Fat jab baby fears on the front page of The Sun. This is probably not a story that will affect you or I particularly directly, but apparently women are today given a double warning on fat jabs. The UK's medicine regulator says all users must take extra care not to get pregnant, as risks to the baby are still unknown. And apparently one of the side effects of Mounjaro, which is the one of the sort of the brand names that people here are taking, is that they seem to be able to bypass or wipe out the effects of the oral contraceptive. So women who are taking the pill have been finding themselves getting pregnant.
Which is an unexpected result of that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's only, I think Ozempic came out in 2017 only, so we don't even have 10 years of research into this.
Which is not enough time, is it?
We don't know the full long-term effects for babies, certainly. Otherwise, there has to be said, it's quite fascinating. Ozempic and the Mounjaro. Ozempic is given to people with diabetes, Mounjaro as a weight loss thing over here. But, kidney improvement, lowers inflammation, Alzheimer's reduction, dementia, increases cognitive abilities. There seems to have a huge range of benefits attached to this thing.
Is it, though, and or is that all it being sort of slightly oversold by some rather enthusiastic pharmacists who want to make a load of money out of it?
No, I mean, I think we're on the point of having something which is akin to the creation of aspirin. I think it's that sort of a level, even if not penicillin, as some people are saying. That might be a bit of a stretch. But in terms of having, I think it's 20%, 25% reduction in some major long-term health issues, I think it is quite a radical drug. I I'm still doing my 3-hour daily walks because I think we haven't got enough research into it after only 8 years or so.
Yeah.
But it's certainly something I think that could be revolutionary. But of course, all of these different side effects are fascinating to see. Now, of course, the pill doesn't work either, so it seems to be a wonder drug with perhaps some unquestionable side effects.
Well, exactly right. And I mean, I've certainly spoken to medical professionals who say there simply isn't enough evidence yet to know what the long-term effects are. And people that I know that have taken it tell me that basically it's just an appetite suppressant. You don't really want to eat. You don't enjoy eating anything. You don't really enjoy the taste of anything. You don't really like having a drink. That kind of joy goes out of your world. And to me, if you're going to be joyless in life, you might as well be dead. You know, if you can't actually go out and enjoy a decent meal or enjoy being out with your friends and having a good drink or whatever it is, if that's all taken away from you in order for you to look unlike yourself because you've lost so much weight that you look sort of cadaverous, I don't think it's a great idea at all.
No, if you enjoy the pleasures of life, food, a good bottle of wine or whatever, but I think if you are someone who's 30 stone,
I think, exactly.
25 stone, you may be enjoying your food a bit too much.
Course, but the effect of what's going on is that an awful lot of people, and many of them are sort of wealthy people who are able to get their hands on it, and for purposes only known to them, they want to lose, a stone or something, or they want to lose a few pounds, and they're taking this drug, and they don't really know how it's going to end up affecting them. And I think that's quite dangerous.
No, I agree entirely. I think we need at least another 5-10 years before we can say anything.
Absolutely right. Let's get a voice note from Perry.
Morning, Mike. I wish I had £1 every time she went, I wouldn't have to work weekends anymore. If you gave me £1 every time she said that, I could have weekends off. That'd be lovely.
That's Rachel Reeves. I mean, if it wasn't for Keir Starmer, she would be the worst stutterer in the government. But, of course, he beats everybody. We'll play you some more of that stuff coming up. Also, coming up, Meghan and Harry, in their fight for privacy, have released yet another video which shows Meghan, when she was pregnant, twerking. I'll ask you to avert your eyes if you're of a nervous disposition, and we'll play it coming up next.
We're 5 MPs, and guess what? We're polling in the lead, about 15% ahead of the Tories. So with the greatest of respect to Mr. Francois, he's become a minor party. That is the reality, and they are disappearing down a plug hole, and people are polling and voting for reform, and I think we'll do so in significant numbers in the future, because we've got common sense policies, and we just tell it as it is. So
I have never seen you so stroppy.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:48. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. Mike says this, morning, Mike, people are sick of the appeasement of every other culture except our own. And Mark says, Mark from Somerset, question time for Prime Ministers is a waste of time. All Starmer does is dodge the questions and it's all jokes and laughter with such serious matters in hand. So very childish. Well, indeed. Let's get a voice note from Paul.
Morning, Mike. Great show. Last August, my stepdaughter was killed in a car accident. And she'd been self-employed for a little while, not very long. After she passed away, we filled in all the appropriate forms, so all the government offices knew that she'd passed away. And last March just gone, we received a fine for her from HMRC for submitting a late tax claim because she was passed away. She hadn't sent in the tax returns, and they wanted to fine her. And it took me 6 weeks to make HMRC understand that she couldn't put in her tax returns because she wasn't here to do that. It caused quite a lot of distress, but eventually they did grasp the fact that she was no longer here. Thanks, Mike. Cheers.
Jesus Christ, that's awful, isn't it? How dreadful. HMRC, I mean, I don't think they've done very many favours for many people over time. The story this morning about them is that they've lost up to 100,000 taxpayers' records to organised criminals in a sort of cyber attack last year. Nobody's really quite sure exactly what information they've got or how much of this information could have been stopped from being given out. But what a terrible story. Imagine that. Paul lost his stepdaughter. She was killed in a car crash. I mean, surely they must be better at sort of joining up whatever government records there are.
I mean, there must be some system there that can deal with that stuff. I mean, it happens every day. People are dealing with these terrible situations, and I just can't believe that, in the 21st century you still have terrible situations like that arising.
I know, absolutely dreadful. Just one more story on Keir Starmer before we move on to Harry and Meghan. Apparently, Madame Tussauds have said that they will not be currently making a waxwork of Keir Starmer. I thought when I read the story at first they were going to say, because obviously we can't improve on the waxwork that he is already. But in fact, it turns out that because they're not sure about how relevant he's going to be in the future, i.e. they don't think he's going to be around very long.
Can you imagine being Keir Starmer reading that in the paper? He gets up in the morning, a little bit happy, this drags you right down to reality.
Those their words are, and of course Downing Street, with absolutely no sense of humour whatsoever, when asked about this, said, clearly this is a matter for Madame Tussauds. I mean, why wouldn't you make a joke of it?
I think Madame Tussauds should make one, so when he goes away, the waxwork can stand in at PMQs.
Yeah.
Make just as much of an impact as he does.
And just put one of those sort of, robotic voices in it with a speaker. Let's talk about Harry and Meghan, because a big piece in The Sun this morning. There's a little bit on the front pages as well. And this is Sussexes cringe while they invade their own privacy again. And this is the Sussexes last night blasted for invading their own privacy after releasing a video of them twerking to induce labour. This is when, of course, Meghan was pregnant. So it's quite an old video, but she's posted the cringy hospital dance footage to celebrate daughter Lilibet's 4th birthday. Let's have a look at it.
Baby mama, this shot's been pregnant for way too long. I tell the DJ turn it off.
If your baby mama, she gon' do that baby mama.
Work.
She gon' put it on you. She gon' do that baby mama. Drop it down, drop it down low. Drop it down, drop it down low. Drop it down low. Do the baby mama when I step out on the top. 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, hit the baby mama when I'm stepping through the door. Yeah, I'm pregnant, but I got a heel flow. Trying to make some money.
I mean, by all means, record something like that, keep it to yourselves, have a bit of a fun look at it once a year, show it to your daughter when she's old enough to enjoy it. But why publish it? Why post it? Particularly when they're always banging on about their privacy.
It's not often I'm lost for words here, but, if you had told me a few years ago that the King's daughter-in-law would be heavily pregnant would be twerking in front of him, showing it to the world, I said you've been into the source too early this morning.
It's
absolutely
very weird,
absolutely astonishing. Charles de Gaulle said prestige cannot survive without mystery. Well, there's not much mystery left
No.
After this, I have to say.
Well, remember
but the thing is, this was released for Lilibet's daughter's 4th birthday, one of several videos. But, they were always so keen to make their children's lives away from the public. They didn't want to have the media intruding, and here they are forcing us to basically endure their birth there. And what on earth Prince Harry was up to with his sort of dad dance there.
Yeah, dad dance, pretty awful, yeah, absolutely.
As South Park said, our worldwide privacy tour continues.
Yes, yeah. We want our privacy. We have to bring that back. Just to go back to the migrants for a change. Stop dinghies at sea, no mercy, it says in page 6 of the Sun. It's too dangerous to arrest people in the shallow waters of the English Channel, apparently, or the Sleeve, as they like to call it. Basically, the French police have said, contrary to what Keir Starmer promised, that they will not be wading into the shallow waters of Normandy. They will not be arresting the migrants before they try to get on boats to come here. So that whole, once again, another lie from Keir Starmer, saying that the French police are going to start doing something which they've never done.
Well, so this is the problem here. Belgium does this. So Belgium basically goes into the water and stops the boats once they're in the water. And so you don't get dinghy crossings coming from Belgium. Right. France, for some reason, has a different interpretation of maritime law. And the problem with the French is it's the unions. The unions, again, as usual, say, no, it's a risk to life and safety. Yeah. Actually, the French government are trying to force the unions to cave in on this. Remember, there's a state visit coming up. Macron is coming over to the UK, and they want to actually have something here. So the French government seem to be actually taking this money now that we're paying, and finally they've agreed to have these new boats, to go 6 new patrol boats, 46 metres long, to actually go in up to 300 metres into the sea and actually stop the dinghies. This is actually good news. If the unions can be forced to actually do it, that's the problem here. Yeah. So actually, this is slightly a good news story, something I've called on for a long time. Get these ships, they're 300 metres into the sea.
If they're going to do it.
But
there's no real incentive, apart from the fact that we're giving them bucket loads of money, like about £500 million. I mean, apart from the money, there's no incentive for the French to do it, because they don't really want to keep these guys. They're more than happy. Don't forget, there was a French politician, I think, this week, who said that as far as the migrants are concerned, Britain is El Dorado, because they see, the glimmering white cliffs of Dover, and they just see money, benefits, we can stay there, we can live there, we can start a life there, we can get a house, we can bring our parents with us, we can bring our families with us, and I'm sure that's how they see us.
Well, it's the Hadel-Mancu motto. The Hadel-Mancu motto is make Britain less attractive than France. Yeah. That's the way. Forget smashing the gangs. Empty the migrant hotels, put them into temporary refugee camps till they can be processed and deported. Yeah. Crack down on the underground economy. The French are very good at that. We get them over here, they disappear into curry houses, they become delivery drivers. Shops. Yeah, you order something on Deliveroo, it says Mohammed is coming, there's a picture, somebody else entirely delivers the food, right? And the rogue landlords who have 10 people staying in one house, no background checks. These are the ways you stop people coming. You reduce the incentives, you cut the benefits. And if they're on a windswept refugee camp in the middle of the Orkneys or somewhere like that, it won't be long before the message gets out that Britain's not the ideal place to come. Yeah. Stay in France, stay in Germany, stay anywhere.
Exactly right. Talking of staying where you are, the blockade of Gaza is about to be witnessed to Greta Thunberg. We did this at the beginning of the week. She's been on this boat which set sail, I think, from Sicily, and it's on its way to Gaza. Apparently she and a bunch of other virtue signalling lefties are going to free the siege of Gaza. They can, as somebody said, they're on a relatively small boat. They're probably bringing enough food for about 12 people, which they say they're going to distribute. The Israelis, on the other hand, are saying if they get any closer, we're going to board the vessel and repel it. And the last time this happened, I'm afraid, the IDF killed 9 people on another boat that came in because a sort of battle ensued between them and these idiots. And I mean, obviously, climate change is not good enough any longer for Greta Thunberg. She now needs to free Palestine.
Yeah, the level of narcissism here. This is all about. Look, I'm Joan of Arc for the modern world. Yeah, right. Look at me saving everyone. You could just imagine the idea of approaching her, and she said, "How dare you? How dare you?" You know, it's one thing for Just Stop Oil and Greta Thunberg to go up against the Metropolitan Police with all their rainbow lanyards. Yeah. It's another thing to go against the Israeli Defence Force. It is. I think they're going to be in for quite a rude awakening if they expect to be given a cup of tea and taken away with a blanket around them.
It's suddenly wake-up time, and they were complaining that on their way sort of past the Hellenic Isles, they saw a drone above them, which they thought was going to be some kind of attack drone from the Israelis. It turned out to be the Greek Coast Guard, that was just simply monitoring them. You know, they're so naive, these people. The idea that they think that this is a great idea, and the picture of the other people around her just shows you how ridiculous the whole idea is. It's just that, you know, spokesman for the group says that, you know, they want to raise international awareness of the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Because nobody's mentioning it at all, are
exactly.
they? I mean, you don't get Sky every 5 minutes telling you that, you know, the Israelis were shot dead another, you know, 21 people, which it turns out they haven't. I've got this from somebody who has no sense of humour, calls himself Anon. Mike, you said you can only have a night's fun by drinking, and if not, you'd rather be dead. That's not what I said, actually. He says, I'm 25 years sober, and along with many other thousands of recovering alcoholics and addicts, I take offence, and I'll bet you won't read this out. Well, all you're doing, Anon, is showing how, having given up drinking, you have lost your sense of humour, and you're not very able to actually enjoy other people's opinions. So I'm very sorry, mate, for you. I'm glad you're 25 years sober, but, you know, you probably would have been happier if you hadn't been an alcoholic in the first place. I don't know. All I'm saying is, you know, if you don't think that I can have some fun by having a drink, and you don't want me to, and you take offence at it, I'm very sorry for you.
I'll drink to that.
Thank you very much indeed. Rafe Heidelmanku, crack open the Jack Daniels. It's only 7 o'clock, and we'll be back after the news.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to around about 3 minutes past 7. It's a bit gloomy out there today. There's no sunrise. There's no big ball that's red sitting on the horizon as it normally does. Yesterday morning we had to close the blinds here at the top of the tower on News HQ, but today we don't have to because it looks just a bit like we haven't really seen the sun yet. I think it's going to be raining for the next few days. Don't worry, though. There's lots more to talk about this morning, including, of course, Rachel Reeves forced to drop net zero cuts, it says on the front page of the Telegraph. It looks as though Mad Ed Miliband has actually won the battle between herself and he, because he wants to keep net zero very firmly high on the agenda, despite the fact that the Labour government says we haven't really got any money. So I'm not quite sure how that's all going to work out, and I'm sure that if you were to make a choice between whether we should be paying pensioners for their heating and winter fuel allowance, whether we should not be paying for the net zero madness, and Jürgen sitting in his little porter cabin, GV Energy, I think you know what the answer would be. Also, fat jab baby fears, it says on the front page of The Sun. Apparently women who have been taking some of those fat jabs, whether it be Ozempic or any other various different alternatives, it turns out that it overrides the pill. So if you're taking the pill as a contraceptive, it might not work if you're also taking the fat jab. So they're putting a warning out saying that if you're not expecting to have any kids, you might want to be a bit more careful, is all I can say. Pensioners face a winter tax hit over fuel. It now looks as though there are some pensioners who may have already passed away who are going to be taxed. They're going to tax the dead, believe it or not, to pay for those who will now be back in receipt of the winter fuel allowance. Also, chaos is what Kemi Badenoch called this government yesterday. She made a big hit at PMQs and finally laid quite a few punches on Keir Starmer, who was left stuttering and stammering and unable to answer an awful lot of what she actually accused him of doing. Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves yesterday was out and about telling us that she's going to spend another 15 billion on some trams and some buses and some trains up in the north of England and in the Midlands as well, all in heartlands where Reform are doing particularly well, interestingly enough. But unfortunately for her, there was a guy standing to her right, behind her right shoulder, who looked to all the world as if he'd rather be almost anywhere else, and he wasn't buying whatever she was selling. Let's get a voice note from Sean.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. That bloke who was stood next to Rachel Reeves yesterday when she was boring everybody to death, he sums up how everybody feels in the entire nation with this Labour government. Fed up of the lies, fed up of the guff. I just wish they'd just go away. You know, that bloke is an absolute legend. You need to get him on your show, mate. Great show, Mike.
Yeah, we need to track him down and find out who this man is. I'm sure somebody will. We'll try and get him on as soon as we can. Meanwhile, it's Sick Note Britain. Something like 20.5 million days off were taken in 2024 because of mental health problems. For heaven's sake, 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Luke says this, morning Mike, obviously Free Gear 2-tier is a total buffoon, everyone knows that, but the way he spoke to Sarah Poachin yesterday was absolutely disgusting, and I don't think it's been made enough of a deal about. Keep up the good work, we will get there. Luke, we absolutely will completely make a big deal of it today, because I think Sarah Poachin's a great MP and she's a great asset to Reform, and I think it's brilliant that she asked a question that had so many people inside of the House of Commons, you know, sucking in air through their teeth going, oh my goodness me, how could anybody ask such a terrible question? We'll get back to that in a moment with James Price, who's here with us in a moment. This one from Rachel. I was really impressed with Kemi again yesterday. She's clearly able. I just don't understand why she can't be like that every single day. Very good point. Let's talk to James Price, who is, of course, the man who we always go to for a dose of common sense. James, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to talk to you as well. Looking forward to some common sense chat.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, let's kick it off with some common sense questions. Sarah Poachin yesterday in the House of Commons, not just as an interesting point that she made, but I want to play you this clip because I want you to watch the reaction of the collective, shall we say, elites in the House of Commons. Check it out.
Given the Prime Minister's desire to strengthen strategic alignment with our European neighbours, will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Can I welcome her to her place? But I'm not going to follow her down that line. But now she is here and safely in her place, perhaps she could tell her new party leader that his latest plan to bet £80 billion of unfunded tax cuts, with no idea how he's going to pay for it, is Liz Truss all over again. Although, considering I think she was a Conservative member when Liz Truss was leader, she probably won't.
And as ever, Keir Starmer turns to kind of insults and rudeness and doesn't really quite know how to talk to women. He's got a real problem, doesn't want to answer the question. But the thing that really surprised me there, James, and probably shouldn't have, is the way that the Commons reacted to such, you know, a heinous idea that, you know, we should do what Denmark has done, or what France has done, what Belgium has done, and what countless other countries in the world have done, which is to make the burqa something that you cannot hide behind legally.
I think Keir Starmer is absolutely right. It's not for the state to tell a Muslim woman what to wear. That's for her husband to do, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Quite right. I mean, some feminist Keir Starmer is, isn't he?
This is the farce of all of this. You know, you've got members of Parliament now who are, as you say, running completely scared of this topic, because the reality is, if they were to join Sarah Potchin in criticising this, they would start featuring lots of threats in their mailbox and lots of death threats coming their way and all that sort of stuff as well. And it's very difficult, obviously, to get accurate and reliable data about whether these women really do choose to wear this or not. Because, of course, if you knock on their door and ask them if they do speak English at all, which many of them will not do, and I've had personal experience of this, when you go canvassing, you knock on a door and ask someone how they'll be voting, that if they do speak English, they'll literally say, you have to ask my husband about that. Right. It's hard to get data out of it, but I can't see that many women would willingly choose to wear a big, heavy black cloth over their entire face all their lives. Yeah. Never be allowed in Britain in 2025 to feel the wind in their hair, or even, in the case of the burqa, on their faces. I mean, it's just, you know, I get lost for words with how utterly ridiculous this is, that people who say, as you say, Mike, that they're feminists and they're promoting women's right to say, no, it's absolutely fine that you have to walk around in this literally medieval sack. It's just plain wrong, and good on this Reform MP for coming out and saying so. Although, of course, afterwards, Reform came out and said, actually, that isn't Reform policy, even though Lee Anderson and then even the leader Farage himself came out and said that he agreed. Yeah. But if Farage is agreeing, but it's not Reform policy, who's stopping it becoming Reform policy?
Yes. Well, I mean, some people are saying that that's where the sort of Zia Youssef problem comes in, because it might be Zia Youssef who says it's not policy, but it might be Nigel Farage who says it is policy. All I know is that I don't believe that Sarah Potchin got up and asked that question without Nigel Farage knowing she was going to ask it, because he was sitting literally 2 people away from her. Between her and him was Richard Tice. I'm sure they had a conversation about it. She put out a tweet before PMQ saying that she had a question to ask, and she says that that was a question that her constituents wanted her to ask, you know, because nobody asked those kind of questions. And you can see by the reaction in the House of Commons why nobody asked those kind of questions, because she will now be considered a pariah, presumably, by everybody in there.
Yeah. Adherents to the religion of peace will send death threats, I suspect, to her. Yeah. Look, I live in a leafy bit of North London, every bit of liberal metropolity that you can imagine, where, you know, a latte costs as much as a small house up north and all of that stuff. And yet, there is a primary school called the Islamia Primary School, where it is a mandatory part of the dress code for 8-year-old girls, not 18, 8-year-old girls to have to wear a veil over their hair. The boys don't have to do it. They seemingly can just wear short trousers. And by the way, the website, I've checked this as well, says that 5-year-old girls may get to wear the veil if they want to, but by 8, it's mandatory. Yeah. And again, we're expected to believe that this is an acceptable thing in London, Britain in 2025. Yeah. And a small number of people willing to speak out against it. The reason that the others don't, that the lefties don't, isn't because they really truly believe that these women are being empowered by it. It's because they're scared of getting their heads chopped off.
Exactly. And if it's such a great idea, why don't they all wear veils?
Yeah,
why don't they all wear burqas? You know, if Jess Phillips is so enamoured by Muslim culture, why doesn't she wear a bleeding burqa? I mean, do us all a favour.
Yeah, absolutely right. Look, and I just want to, before, you know, there's any bleating lefties who are watching this, my old boss is a guy called Nadim Zahawi. People remember him as the vaccine guy and all the rest. He was born in Baghdad and fled Saddam and came here. He had a great uncle who was a famous poet, of all things, in Baghdad in the 1920s. And this guy was writing poems about how the veil was backwards and that people should cast it aside. If you could do that in Baghdad in the 1920s, surely we can have some members of parliament with the stones to talk about banning it in 2025.
You would like to think so. Or at least have the debate. You know, I don't even say ban it. I just say talk about it. You know, let's have a conversation conversation, as you and I are now having, without sort of sharp intakes of breath, you know, oh, goodness me, oh, I'm not sure we can say anything about this because obviously it's, you know, it's haram. You know, ridiculous, absolute madness. The one thing that did happen yesterday, which I think was quite good, was that finally Kemi Badenoch appeared to put Keir Starmer on the back foot and render him practically speechless, stuttering, stammering, didn't know what to say. Let's have a look at what she did to him while she called this government a government of chaos.
Mess he is making of our economy. The OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public. I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child benefit cap. He's talking about the Kremlin. He's saying everything he can to distract from the mess he is making of our economy. The OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public safe. Just as he's releasing more criminals onto the streets. His cabinet are squabbling with each other. They've said that they've lost control of the borders, but he still managed, Mr. Speaker, to find £30 billion to give away the Chagos Islands. This is total and utter chaos. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
The only advice, Mr. Speaker, she gets up on a Wednesday morning, scrolls through social media, never does anything. We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. And we're working in the US, and that will be coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Please. Let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
Even Lindsay Hoyle was on top form yesterday. You know, all those Caribbean trips must be helping him deal with the realities of life. He says, you know, please listen to the question, even if you don't believe you're getting an answer, which I think is right.
Absolutely, yeah, the stuttering coming out of Keir Starmer there. You know, he's sort of a very slow operating system going anywhere. Well, all he can sort of talk about is tax rises or something. And yet when he's faced with that, which was, I think, definitely Kemi Badenoch's best performance at PMQs, coming in, I think, at a pretty important time. It's wonderful to see some fire and some fight in the Conservative Party that isn't just from Robert Jenrick, who must be getting backache from carrying the weight of his party for a while right now.
Yeah, I mean, I had him on yesterday and I said, I have to ask you this question, Robert. You know, do you think you'll be leader of the party come the end of the summer? And he still remains fiercely loyal to Kemi Badenoch, but there's no doubt that he certainly walks around and struts about and films videos as if he is the leader, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's just, I'm a little biased because I know him a bit. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And for those who doubt the sincerity of his strident right-wing rebirth, I think this has happened in every department that he went into. When he went into the housing department, he saw the scale of the problem there, gets sent into the Home Office, where you spend all day dealing with foreign rapists and criminals and terrorists and the worst sort of subhuman scum that this country has ever had to deal with. You know, it does radicalise you, and I think it's very excellent that he is doing such a kind of one-man crusade, and I look forward to the rest of my party stepping up and following his example as well.
Yes. Well, James, great to see you. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. James Price, former government advisor. You'll get an opportunity to see how the rest of the party is following up on all of that. Mel Stride is coming up very shortly. He's going to tell us what he make of the Prime Minister's questions yesterday, but also he's going to talk about Liz Truss. He says Tories will never again put the economy at risk like Liz Truss did. Is it time perhaps for the Tories to move on a little bit? 0344 499 1000. Morning, Mike, says Mel, not Mel Stride. Why does Keir Starmer always have to be nasty? Does he really think he's being clever and funny? Seeing the MPs behind him laughing along is like watching a load of kids in the background. When are we going to see the grown-ups that he promised? We just want him to actually answer the questions asked for once, not all the other waffle he comes out with. That is a genuine answer. That's it. 7:17.
there was some local resentment about this.
There was a bit of local resentment. I mean, everybody there hoped that she would be found alive and well, but I actually had been to Pride prior to Maddie going missing on holiday.
Right.
And when I went there then, it was this bustling, incredibly touristy, full of English families with young children. When I went back, understandably, it was just after this little girl had gone missing, but it was peak holiday time, the beaches were deserted, the restaurants were empty.
Wow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:20. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Reeves is not cutting net zero, says Bill in Cheshire. She obviously missed the lecture on low-hanging fruit then. Dumping or drastically reducing net zero costs would be the one action that could transform the economy overnight. More proof that this government have no real plan and are completely bonkers. Well, let's talk about the economic state of our nation, because it's clearly true that there isn't any money, that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, doesn't know what she's doing, and Keir Starmer doesn't have a clue either. Let's talk to Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mel, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I'm sorry to see the rain falling down in the middle of what should be the start of summer, but here we are. I suppose it fits the mood of the nation. We're all feeling a bit dampened down. We're all feeling a bit unenthusiastic. This government seems to have squashed any sort of entrepreneurial ambition that people might have had. Nobody's spending any money. Nobody's got any money. It looks as though they're leading us down a path of destruction. I can't think of anything good to say. I'm not going to even pretend to be balanced about this. They're absolutely horrendous, aren't they?
Well, they are, and there doesn't appear to be much sunshine on the horizon, I can tell you, here in Westminster, Mike, because, as you say, we've got a government through their own choices who've come into office, whacked up taxes, particularly on businesses, talked down the economy with all this nonsense about this fictitious 22 billion black hole. That has killed the animal spirits in the economy. And they've also, of course, stoked up with all this spending they've been doing, inflation, which has put a lot of pressure on people for their living standards. And that's one of the reasons why, of course, people don't feel they've got money in their pockets, is this government have been completely ruinous when it's come to driving up prices, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and also when you look at the level of guilt, and I know you want to talk about Liz Truss and what happened under her Prime Ministership, albeit the short time that she was in. When you look at some of the things that are happening in our economy, it's actually worse now than it was under Liz Truss, isn't it?
Well, they're two different situations. I think the point about the mini-budget back in the back end of 2022, and I'm going to give a speech on this a bit later today, is I think we have to recognise that a mistake was made, and I think we have to be honest about that, because it runs completely counter to where we are as a party when it comes to sorry, I've lost my earpiece now and I've lost you. When it comes as a party, now I can hopefully hear you again. I think I've got you.
Yes.
Yeah, when it comes to fiscal responsibility, which it really has to lie at the heart of the Conservative Party. It's always been in our DNA. And what I'm going to be arguing today, Mike, is that you've got a Labour Party that has completely lost control of our economy fiscally, and people are paying the price. You've got a Reform Party who are dealing and peddling, I'm afraid, fantasy economics, this idea that you could just promise everybody everything and nobody's got to pay for it. Is just nonsense. And really, we need to continue now to establish the Conservative Party as the serious, grown-up party when it comes to fiscal responsibility in the months and the years ahead.
Well, Liz Truss, of course, has responded to some of the things that you've said, and she says that you were one of the Conservative MPs who kowtowed to the failed Treasury orthodoxy and was set on undermining her plan for growth from the moment that she beat your chosen candidate for party leadership. So you've sort of kicked off a bit of an internal struggle inside the Tory party, which surely at this time, when Labour are doing so badly, you don't really need to do you?
Well, I'm not going to get drawn into the he said, she said of this, Mike. The reality
well, you're
is,
already in it because you started it.
Accept this. That, well, no. What I'm talking about is what happened economically rather than anything else, or who did what at what time. The reality is that we lost our mantle for fiscal responsibility as a party at that time, a hard-won position that we had, and we are on the path to firmly regaining that. And I'm also just explaining, as I will do later, why it's so important now that we do that, when we've got a Labour Party which is really completely off the rails when it comes to the economy, and people are suffering as a consequence. And we've got Nigel Farage on the other side. You know, Mike, when he says, oh, I'll take everybody, he says he's earning up to £20,000 out of income tax altogether. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, because that costs, according to the IFS, 50 to 80 billion pounds a year to deliver. That's about a third, getting onto a half of what we spend on the National Health Service and its 1.3 million employees every year. He's given no indication as to how any of that is going to be funded, no realistic indication. And that's just not good enough. And we've got to be the party that stands for, you know, the honesty and integrity to accept when we've made mistakes, but also to reclaim very firmly that position as the party of fiscal responsibility, who will never do anything that can't be funded and will never risk our economy in the future.
But I think the problem with talking about what is effectively macroeconomics to the electorate is that most people only really want to know about the pound in their pocket. You know, they keep being told by Keir Starmer that he's making working people better off, that they have more money in their pockets. They know that's not true, so they don't trust him. Similarly, if you start talking about, you know, billions and billions of pounds being lost to the Treasury, people now understand that there are billions and billions of pounds being spent and wasted by whichever government happens to be in. And I've been talking to the reform guys for years, and Richard Tyson for a long time told me that, you know, the 20,000 threshold, if it was to be applied, would actually create more spending power for many people, which would mean that you could collect all manner of revenues in VAT and in various other ways. So, I mean, it's not quite right to say that it's not properly costed. What it is something that people understand and people can see might be good for them.
Mike, it's fantasy economics. I mean, you can always say, well, if we cut tax and people have got more money to spend, etc., and that's true. But the reality is you can't get away from the hard fact that if you're going to cut taxes in a responsible way, you've got to explain where the money is going to come for that tax cut. And the reality is that Reform are absolutely not doing that. When they talk about cutting waste, they, for example, said they'll find £65 billion over 5 years, that's £13 billion a year, by making 5% savings on the cost of quangos across our country. If you do the maths on that, it therefore appears that they're saying we're spending 250 billion or £250 billion just on quangos. Well, that doesn't add up, I'm afraid. That just won't cut it. They've got to explain rigorously how they are going to fund those kind of tax cuts. And if you don't do that, when it comes to pounds in people's pockets, I'm afraid you end up in a fairly dark place and everybody suffers.
But the thing is that they are actually now proving that there is an awful lot of waste in public services and an awful lot of waste in the public sector, which includes government and civil service. I mean, Zia Yusuf saying just yesterday, Kent County Council tendered a contract for recruitment services for £350 million over 4 years. That's £87.5 million per year of taxpayer money being spent effectively on advertising vacancies and interviewing people. And you know as well as I do, Mel, you've been in the business a long time, there's an awful lot of waste in government. There's an awful lot of waste in every single civil service department. Many people have tried to chop it down. Many people have tried to cut it, and it hasn't ever worked. But we all know, as individuals and citizens of the United Kingdom, that, you know, there is loads of money that you could save if you were in government. And because of COVID and because of the amount of money that was freed up for that, people go, well, you can just find the money, can't you?
Well, look, you're absolutely right. Of course, there's a lot of waste in government, and that's one of the things that I'll be talking about this morning, and an approach that we will be working up so that if we are to form the next government, we absolutely get on top of that and bear down on that. There's a broader point about the size of the state. We had 365,000 civil servants before COVID. We've got 515,000. Right. today. That speaks volumes about the bloated nature of the state. But you cannot, Mike, at the same time, point to the fact that, of course, there's waste, but also say that just by, plucking numbers out of thin air, as they do in their manifesto with reform, I think the figure is 50 billion in savings from that kind of activity, that this is going to fund all these tax cuts without explaining how you're going to do it. And the order and magnitude of the kind of funding that would be required for the kind of tax cuts and other things that they're promising the electorate left, right and centre are just eye-watering. And so they are now going to be put under scrutiny in a way that they haven't been before. We've got to shine the light of truth on those numbers and ask, are they a credible,
and that's a good thing.
Fiscally responsible party? And that is a good thing. And I'm saying that as a Conservative Party, we will not make commitments that are unfunded. We will be the stewards of the economy that make sure that we hold the economy together, that it's stable and has rock-solid foundations by sticking to fiscally responsible decisions. That's the party that we are, and that is the party, and all of that is absolutely in the DNA of the Conservative Party.
But you're also facing a pretty existential time at the moment, and an event possibly that some people think could change the Conservative Party and possibly finish it off for all time. You're currently running fourth in an awful lot of the polls that are going on. A lot of that has to do with the last 14 years of government. People have lost faith in not only the Tory party, but also the two-party system, I think. And I think there's a genuine shift going on. Do you not see that that might also be something that people want to see?
Well, look, we've got 4.5 years to a general election. I think it would be very foolish of anybody to predict the outcome of that in 4.5 years' time. You're absolutely right. We're in very volatile times with multi-party system, with the first past the post system, and that means that all sorts of outcomes could shift around very quickly, actually. I mean, if you were interviewing me back in 2019, and heaven forbid I was a socialist politician, Mike, you'd be saying this is your worst result since the 1930s. You're going to be out of office for generations, aren't you? And things look very glum for the Labour Party. And they came in with one of the largest landslides in our history just 5 years later. Look what happened to Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, he was a shoo-in apparently in Canada, 23 points ahead in the polls back in the January, ended up losing that election, and not only that, he lost his own seat. Things are very volatile, but what we've got to stick to is not get distracted by the polls. We've got to stick to coming up with the solutions and the answers that will rewire our economy so that it works for everybody and is put on a trajectory of increased growth and productivity so that we can meet all the challenges that our country is going to have going down the line. And right at the heart of that, Mike, has got to be fiscal responsibility. Being that party, in the absence of any of that with Labour or Reform, that is going to be grown up about levelling with the British people and saying that everything that we come forward with has to be rigorously funded, an iron grip on that. And that is what the Conservative Party is all about.
But of course, you handed victory to the Labour Party. I mean, most people agree now that Labour didn't win a landslide. They were kind of given it because the Tories lost the election rather than they actually won it. And we can see that now because of how unpopular Keir Starmer became almost within a month of becoming the Prime Minister of this country. But, I mean, let me ask you one final question before I let you go, Mel. Rachel Reeves is forced to drop net zero cuts, it says on the front page of the Telegraph today. The Treasury has for months been considering cuts to the £13.2 billion warm homes plan, which aims to insulate properties across Britain and make them more energy efficient. Whenever I've asked Tory sort of former ministers about net zero, they've always been a bit unsure of where they actually stand on it, because I think for Reform, they are very clear that they think there's a lot of money to be saved by getting rid of the net zero commitments. Would you, as a Tory, commit to getting rid of net zero commitments?
Well, so Kemi Badenoch has been extremely clear on exactly that point. I mean, she has said that the net zero target for 2050 is something that is not realistic and is therefore something that we will not be pursuing in that sense. But at the same time, of course, it's always going to make sense to make better use of energy and not waste energy and so on and so forth. But we need to now, as a party, do the deep thinking around, for example, how we get prices down for people and how we get that balance right. You know, when it comes to electricity, we're paying, or our businesses are paying 50% more than the French and the Germans and 4 times as much as the Canadians and in the United States. And if you're going to have a competitive economy, you've got to have competitive energy prices, and that's something that in what Kemi has said on this issue, she totally gets and recognises, and we will be doing a lot more work on.
Well, how would you make energy cheaper then? Would you start reopening those fields in the North Sea rather than allowing Norwegian gas and oil to come to us? Would you frack?
Yes. We'll look at all those things, but as regards to the North Sea, absolutely. It is utterly shameful that this government is destroying jobs and putting up energy prices by choking off licences to the North Sea, taxing those businesses very heavily in order to choke off gas and oil production there. This, if we don't produce it here, Mike, it gets produced somewhere else. We just lessen our energy security. And in fact, we're bringing in a lot of liquid natural gas from around the world, and that actually, in terms of carbon, has 4 times the carbon footprint compared to actually extracting it from the North Sea. So that policy is complete nonsense from the Labour Party. It's destroying jobs and making people's lives more expensive.
Yeah. Mel Stride, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer there, talking to us from a very wet and rainy College Green on Westminster. Let's get a voice note from Andy on PMQs.
Yeah, I watched PMQs yesterday, and I thought Sarah Poaching was fantastic. And yeah, I don't like the way Keir Starmer spoke to her at all. Very disrespectful. I thought she made a fantastic point, and I'm glad she had the cojones to actually bring it up. I think it's fantastic, so we need more of her in my view, and less of Metal Mickey Stomer. So cheers, Mike.
Andy, absolutely right. Sure, a lot of people would absolutely honestly agree with you. Hello, Mike, says Tristan in Bedford. Mr Stride obviously ignored what Nigel Farage said about scrapping net zero and DEI. I do wonder what Mr Stride thinks of scrapping net zero. Well, you just heard from his own lips exactly what he thought about scrapping net zero. He didn't quite say they'd scrap it, but he would scrap the targets, which are unrealistic. Had Liz Truss faced down the markets, the Bank of England and Davos a lot, then by now the country would be flying. She was set up by the blob, says Jackie. How dare the wishy-washy Remainer Conservatives pass the buck and blame her? Keep up the good work on our behalf. Certainly will. Coming up next, Richard Tice. He'll have something to say, I'm pretty sure, about what you've just heard.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
that is genuinely the Prime Minister trying to make a sentence. I'm not kidding you. That is not in any way AI. Even Madame Tussauds have said, you know, he's so wooden, they can't make a waxwork of him. They say they're not sure how long he's going to be relevant for. Well, I'm telling you, he's not going to be relevant for very much longer if he carries on the way he is. Let's talk to Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, who I'm sure has got plenty to say about yesterday's doings in Parliament, but also Mel Stride's statement there, Richard, that, you know, they're proving themselves to be, apparently, the grown-ups on the economic situation in this country. Very good morning.
Well, it is morning, but it's a rather wet morning, isn't it? A bit grim and gloomy, which I think reflects the mood of the nation about not only this government, but actually it's interesting. I did hear Mel Stride just then, and look, what I put out on social media is I think that Mr. Stride needs to explain why, if the Tories are so good at managing the economy, why do they increase taxes to a 70-year high? Why do they increase wasteful government spending to a 70-year high? Why do they increase the national debt by 2.5 times, whilst lowering growth rates to the lowest in 70 years? The truth is, I think they actually just need to apologise as they enter minor party status for their utter failures to manage the economy. And it's laughable for them to try and challenge reform on our economic plans. We're very clear about it, and we're literally just exposing it now that we're taking over the running of a number of councils. You know, we've discovered a £30 million bridge to nowhere in Lincolnshire County Council run by the Tories, believe it or not. So much for their competence. And the waste everywhere is shocking. The question is how much of it we can cut out quite quickly. So I'm very happy to stand on our track record as successful business people. I don't think Mr. Stride has run a multi-billion-pound multinational business listed on the stock market where the share price tripled in 4 years under, guess what, under my stewardship. So, yeah, I'm happy to take him on any day of the week.
Yeah, well, I mean, all you've got to do is listen to the words of Liz Truss, who, in response to Mel Stride's speech yesterday, said, until Mel Stride admits the economic failings of the last Conservative government, the British public will not trust the party with the reins of power again. And I think that's right. And the problem is that with every Conservative former minister that I speak to, you know, they kind of admit that they made mistakes, but they don't quite own up to the fact that they handed this government the reins of power by being so completely and utterly useless, and we're all suffering as a result.
And you asked him a simple question, what's your position on net zero? Will you scrap it? And we got a load of turgid waffle that came back. We're very clear, net zero is a catastrophe for this country. That's why it's net stupid zero, and you scrap it and you save tens of billions every year. The Pilgrim Hospital in Boston, Mike, they're spending over £20 million on replacing perfectly good fossil fuel boilers with some form of electrification that's going to achieve nothing for improved patient care. 20 million quid. It's just one small example of the net zero madness that is being imposed upon us. The cost is tens of billions every year. Scrap that, we can save that money. We can save lots of other money by cutting waste. So that's how we're going to do it. And of course, we'll do those things first, deliver those savings, and then you can talk about reducing taxes, making work pay, making risk-taking pay, and give a direction of travel. So, yeah, we know exactly what we're doing, and I think maybe that's why we're at the top of the polls.
But he, of course, echoes what Keir Starmer says about, you know, Nigel Farage and Reform's fantasy economics. Can you address that and say that it isn't? Because, you know, I know Nigel Farage has laid out the plans as to how you would actually steward the economy. So let's hear it again.
So, well, I'll just repeat what I've just said, which is that we will make the savings on cutting out vast sums of waste, and we're already starting to do that, and we'll prove that with the councils that we're running. We wouldn't build a £30 million bridge to nowhere like the Tories did in just one council alone. And we will scrap net zero, which will save tens of billions, and we will stop paying voluntary interest from the Bank of England's QE printed money to enrich city institutions that's impoverishing British taxpayers and costing tens of billions of pounds. Those are just three key areas that will generate significant savings, and as we deliver that, then we can give a direction of travel of cutting taxes to make work pay. And of course we will do it in a responsible way. I think the truth is that what the two main parties, the uni-party of them, they don't like is that there's a disruptor coming in with some business-like experience, a solid, successful track record, that actually telling it as it is. And look, some of it will be uncomfortable, but in order to prevent disaster, we have to change course, and we have to change course rapidly.
Harry Cole wrote in The Sun this week, in his final column before he shoots off to America to become the North American editor, that what reform needs now is a bit of a more structured team and possibly a shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Surely that's got to be you, hasn't it?
Well, at the end of the day, I serve at the pleasure of the boss. But, you know, I do understand how money works, how you run businesses. And I think, frankly, given that there's not much business experience anywhere on either of the two front benches, you know, we've been around the block. We've run successful businesses. And we're saying our pitch to the British people is, if you want to save Britain and if you want to get better off, then reform under our leadership, our experience, is the way forward. But look, there's a long way to go. And also, of course, we will make mistakes. That's inevitable. It's the nature of life. But I think we'll get a lot more right than we get wrong. And when we get it wrong, we'll be honest with people saying, look, we tried this. It hasn't quite worked. We're tweaking it. We're adapting it. Because guess what? That's what you do in the world of business. And just be honest with folk in the same way you're honest with shareholders.
Sure. Big moment of the day yesterday for Sarah Poitchin. She got up and asked the question that apparently nobody wanted her to ask in the House of Commons. There was a sharp intake of breath. You'd have thought that she'd asked for, you know, the royal family to be disbanded or something. You know, they all said this is terrible, you know. She said, is Keir Starmer going to join with his European compatriots and ban the burqa? It's a bit unclear as to whether it's reform policy or not. I know that that she said it was just something that her constituents wanted to ask. Is it reform policy to ban the burqa?
Yeah, well, the first thing we want to do, Mike, is actually let's have a debate about it. Let's have a national debate. And it was brilliant from Sarah to come forward as a woman to say that she thinks it's a safety issue. And I think the first thing is to educate people. Most people wouldn't be aware that in France, Belgium, Austria, Denmark, Bulgaria, Norway, Switzerland and Luxembourg, there is a full burqa ban. So if other nations have come to that conclusion in the Europe that Keir Starmer is so attached to, then maybe we should have a national conversation about it in a respectful way and find out where people are. And indeed, you know, we want to find out where our own membership is on this. And so let's have a debate, find out as a nation where people are at, what people think about it, look at what's working elsewhere, understand more about the issue, and then you come to a sort of a consensus view. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable and rational thing. And different MPs in a party, you know, my view is I think it is the burqa, I think it is a repressive garment that I think makes women second-class citizens. I think it's a misogynistic thing. It's not required under the Quran. Let's be absolutely clear. And I just think that I suspect, but I think your commentator James was saying earlier, I suspect that many women who wear the burqa would rather not wear the burqa. But let's hear from them and let's have that debate. And there may be some who actually are very happy wearing it. So I just think it's a sensible thing to talk about, to discuss in a country that's founded in Christianity.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people would agree, and in fact a lot of our viewers and listeners already agree with you, which is of course why you seem to be topping the popularity polls. But there we are. Richard Tice, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Who knows, possibly the Shadow Chancellor to come, if that should be the thing that happens. Don't forget, we've got a podcast that comes out every single day right here on Morning Glory, right after the show finishes around about 10:15. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just on the Sarah Poitchin question about banning the burqa, there's lots of discussions about women's rights around it, but how do you know it's even a woman that's wearing it? You know, it could be anything. If I was a male terrorist and I wanted to get from safe house to safe house without being detected by the police, then I'd just put on some frilly black gloves and a burqa, and nobody's going to know you're a man. Could be anybody.
I mean, certainly we've seen cases of people disappearing who were wanted by the police. I remember one case of a wanted terrorist who disappeared out of the country because he put a burqa on and managed to get himself to an airport where he wasn't asked to show himself. They've now changed the law as a result of that. And he managed to get out of the country and escape justice because he put a burqa on. You're absolutely right. But let's have the conversation. Let's have the debate. Let's not have this ludicrous kind of childlike kind of, oh, we can't talk about that. Oh, like they all did in the House of Commons yesterday. Absolutely pathetic. Ridiculous. 7:48.
Betty had found out that she wasn't going to get the £300 winter fuel allowance that she relied on to keep her home warm and to heat herself through the cold months. So you went round, as you did every day, and you found her literally frozen to death. Unbelievable.
Dharma said about the last government, before he got in, that Tories would say that there's 4,000 people going to die of the cold this winter. Well, he's beat that target by 4,950.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Reeve said the economy is in a better state. Where is she looking? Says Sharon from Staffordshire. And Glenn from Leeds says Rachel Reeve should be called Nasal Thieves. What a robotic joke. And Debbie in Hawley says, I think AI is more sincere than Keir Starmer. Just listening to Question Time, it should be called Guess the Question. Well, quite right too. Well, here's a good question for you. Why on earth are local councils all over the country still convinced that low traffic neighbourhoods are the way to go? Yesterday, a Labour council, Lambeth to be precise, was forced to axe their low traffic neighbourhood they put into Dulwich. It raked in £1 million for them in fines, but it was judged to be illegal. Let's talk to Nick Freeman, motoring lawyer and commentator. Nick, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
This is a great decision, isn't it, and a great victory for common sense, I suppose, if for want of a better word. A judge rejected an appeal. They'd already lost in May, but the appeal was heard and they lost again. Traffic being restricted in neighbourhoods like this is not a good idea, is it?
It's not a good idea. This actually is a landmark decision. It's the first time that a council has been successfully challenged. Rather than them revoking it, the judge actually has quashed it, which means he's taken it down. And of course, as a consequence, the reason he's done that is because Dulwich, their action group, prepared a 53-page document. There was 67.5% of the people who opposed it. And Lambeth Council basically ignored all the representations that were made. So they had their own agenda, which is what many people suspect councils do. They went ahead and obviously it was subject to legal challenge. And as you rightly said, it's now been quashed. That's the end of it. But of course, there are huge consequences. Consequence number one, obviously, is the money that was spent setting it up has been completely wasted. They've raised over £1,080,000 in fines, which now must be returned. And then you've got to consider the businesses that have actually gone under as a consequence of these LTNs and experimental traffic orders. And of course, in my view, the businesses may well have a civil action against Lambeth Council. And it goes further than that, because if the councillors, the particular councillors concerned, have been shown to just completely disregard willfully their duty, their public duty, there may be something for the police to investigate, misfeasance in public office.
Yes.
I'm not saying that anyone is guilty. It's a civil offence. It's a tort. But in my view, the relevant people concerned should certainly take legal advice. Number one, in connection with suing any civil actions against the council and nominating the councillors concerned, and also asking the police to investigate whether or not there is an action for misfeasance in public office. Because this creates a precedent, and this is a warning, a red letter warning to councils throughout the country. You cannot pursue your own agenda without proper consultation and taking into account the wishes of those who you represent.
Yes.
So this, as I say, is a landmark case with huge ramifications and consequences.
Particularly affecting local neighbourhoods as they do. I mean, I was victim. I almost got in touch with you actually about it, Nick, but I decided in the end just to pay up, which is what I've done. I got 2 fines for driving down the street near where I live on my way to the dry cleaners. It turns out that unbeknownst to me, and because the sign wasn't clear enough that I didn't see it, a particular road that I drive down is now restricted between the hours of 9 and 9:45 and 3 and 3:45 because there's a school there, so that you can drive down it every other time, but if you drive down it during those times, it's £160 fine. And I got 2 of them in the same week because I wasn't aware that there was even a new rule, you know. And when I appealed it, they said, well, you should have chosen an alternative route. I said, well, the alternative route is actually closed due to roadworks, and so that's the only way I could go. And they still didn't allow the appeal, so I've had to pay the 80 quid, so it's 160 quid down to me. But this kind of arbitrary change of the way, the rules of the road, seems to me to be completely outrageous.
Well, in my view, I'm going to say it's an anti-motoring lobby. That they want to get cars off the road. They want to get cars in other areas. If you look at this 53-page report, what Dulwich said was, look, we're happy to sit down and have a proper consultation, but what you're doing is moving congestion and pollution to different areas. You're not solving the problem, you're kicking the can down the road, which really is probably a matter of common sense and applies in most cases. And they didn't want to hear that for reasons I'm not familiar with.
Right. And they continue, don't they, to try and use what I would call spurious scientific data, which suggests that the air is somehow cleaner because they've moved the traffic a couple of blocks away. And clearly, you know, the air is the air. You know, it can't be any dirtier 2 blocks away just because, you know, that's where the traffic is, and now where you are, it's clean. The air travels.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, but it's not achieving anything, is it, to say, right, I'm going to make it temporarily cleaner on my street, and the adjacent street's going to be more polluted than it was before. And that's exactly what this report illustrated. But the council just completely ignored it, and I think they're going to have huge problems now. The problem, of course, is who is it who pays at the end of the day? It's the taxpayer, and that's why I'm suggesting that if there are any civil actions, the relevant councillors are individually named and involved in the action, because that will serve as a huge deterrent to would-be people, would-be councillors pursuing their own agenda, to make them sit up and think, actually, do I want this aggravation, or am I actually going to do this properly, fairly, in compliance with what my legal requirements are?
Yeah. And in terms of the legalities of any council taking this kind of measure, I mean, presumably you would advise any campaigning group in various places, like Oxford's got a problem apparently, Newcastle as well, where taxi drivers can't go into certain places and they can't actually make a living, that if you were to pressure these councils financially or threaten them financially, whether it's by you know, a lawsuit or a claim of one kind or another, is that the way forward, do you think?
Well, the way forward to start off with is to do some proper research, and you have to have an action group. You have to invest in proper research. So you're not going forward just saying, look, I don't want you on my street. You've got to explain why this isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Dulwich did. And it made complete sense. So you can't just express your own personal view. It's got to be a collective effort. And it may be in certain situations that actually an LTN is the right solution. It depends on each particular scenario. So my advice will be employ experts, get some money together, get an action group together, do your research properly, don't cut corners, and then get involved in the consultation process in a constructive way, and hopefully the council similarly engages, and see where you go. And if you have the data that suggests actually this is a really bad idea and the council go ahead with it, then obviously you can become more forceful, you can threaten legal action, and no doubt councillors and councils will be listening and take note of what's happening.
Maybe we'll actually get them to do what they should be doing. Nick, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Coming up next, Peter Hitchens. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8. It is Thursday, the 5th of June. It doesn't look like it, mind you, if you look out. I mean, in a couple of weeks' time, Wimbledon will be kicking off, so I suppose that's when we should really expect the rain to fall. But basically, it is looking pretty grim this morning out there, and it's apparently going to be a pretty wet weekend. So not much to look forward to, I'm afraid. But don't worry, there's always some fantastic light on the horizon, light at the end of the tunnel, if you like, when you gaze towards the Labour government that we are currently endorsing and enjoying. One what I say endorsing, but we're not actually endorsing it at all, because when that light at the end of the tunnel unfortunately becomes real, you realise it's a train actually driving towards you, being driven by an ASLEF man who's just had a very, very large pay rise thanks to the government, who are profligate with our money and who have got no money left, apparently. They're going U-turn after U-turn. Even Kemi Badenoch made them look ridiculous yesterday, which is quite an achievement. Let's get a voice note from Brian on PMQs.
Morning, Mike from Southend. Just looking at Prime Minister's question time. You know, it's a simple question. Yes, I'm going to try and ban it. No, I won't ban it. Simple answer. The man's an idiot, and he's got to be pulled up over it. Then you ask him, I hope that is clear. How many more times is he going to refer back to Liz Truss? Christ, move on, man. Move on.
Well, even the Tories can't move on from Liz Truss. We just spoke to Mel Stride in the last hour. He wants to say sorry for what Liz Truss did to the economy. Well, I'll tell you what Liz Truss did to the economy is a mere nothing compared to what this government is doing to the economy. Rachel Reeves yesterday went to a bus factory to announce that she was going to expand by £15 billion trams, buses and trains in Manchester, in the Midlands and in parts of the West Country. She looked for all intents and purposes like a broken woman. The guy who was standing to her immediate right, as you can see there on the screen, has become a national hero by looking about as disinterested as anybody could look while listening to what can only be described as a rather robotic speech by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Nobody thinks that she'll be there in the job in a year's time. Nobody thinks Keir Starmer's going to last that long either, because he just can't seem to make up his mind what he actually represents and what he believes in. He just simply doesn't know. We've had already 2 days since the breakout of the new idea that we should have a strategic defence review and we should suddenly get ourselves ready on a war footing. Everybody's already forgotten about that. I mean, this government moves so quickly from one bridge to another that it's almost as though they don't mean anything they say. Surely that can't be the case. Peter Hitchens is here. We'll ask him for his views on all of that and, of course, on whether or not we should at least talk about banning the burqa. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. That's a real clip. I kid you not. This is, of course, the home of common sense. Sarah is fantastic, says Michelle. It looks to me like the majority of men stood behind robotic Reeves would rather be anywhere else. She is absolutely abysmal. And Joy says, how many times did Rachel say or during her presentation? Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. She is perhaps the worst public speaker in the history of politicians, apart from, of course, her boss, Keir Starmer, who is so wooden that even Madame Tussauds will not make a waxwork of him because they're not sure how relevant he'll be in the future. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens about all of this. Columnist for the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Some ignominious thing, isn't it, when you wake up to be told, I'm afraid you're too boring and irrelevant for Madame Tussauds to make a waxwork of you?
Well, I suppose so. I don't mind a bit of abuse in politics. It spices things up. But I am actually much more concerned about the fact that this is actually quite an interesting government in that it is marching into areas where I think no British government has ever gone before. We haven't got any money. We're hideously in debt as a government and as a country. We have no economy to speak of. And yet we continue to announce almost every day more plans to spend more money that we haven't got on things we can't afford. And nobody laughs.
Yeah.
The argument doesn't take place in the House of Commons. Nobody stands up and says, look, excuse me, but we simply do not have the resources to do any of the things that you're talking about. We are a country in dire danger. And it reminds me more and more and more of the last days of the Soviet Union, a time of complete delusion. I mean, they had a fairly elaborate welfare state. They had a health service. They had very, very heavy subsidies on all kinds of things like food prices that kept the cost of living down. And then all of a sudden it came to an absolute end. Everything collapsed. And people were left with nothing. There were people standing, as I've often remarked, on the streets selling their possessions to buy bread, because they continued to live in this fantasy land until it was too late to do anything about it. And I feel increasingly this is what's happening here.
Yeah.
How long can we carry on having a currency on the world markets which still is taken seriously by others, if at home we behave like this. And I'll say it again because it seems to me to sum up the position perfectly. If this country were a man walking about the streets of the country, shouting the sort of things which the government and indeed the opposition shout about what it's going to do, it would be section or delusions of grandeur. We've completely lost touch. I have to say all this stuff about being ready for battle, which we've had.
The war footing stuff was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Particularly annoying. This is a country which can't defend the beaches of Dungeness against illegal mass migration. And so what are all these weapons for? If we don't have the resolve or the wit to put an end to that, then what are all these weapons for? Who else is it we're not going to stop? You can have all the weapons you like. I'm really not necessarily going to mean you can do anything. And why are we involving ourselves in this stuff? We're not a big country anymore. We're not a powerful country anymore. We're not an important country anymore. Nobody cares what we think or what we say, except the people living here. You have to care because the way in which the country is mismanaged is rapidly becoming a danger to everybody's livelihood. How high can taxes go? How high can inflation go before people begin to realize that the position is completely unsustainable? And how many people can be paid each day to stay away from work? Astonishing numbers of people are simply not working, and that means you and I are paying for them. And a lot of people really don't have any spare money to pay for food and are having to pay out of taxes to support people who won't go to work. And this gets a bigger and bigger problem all the time. At the same time, we have a police force which cannot police, and whose leaders actually have the nerve to write to the Prime Minister saying, well, if you don't give us a bigger budget or sustain our budget, then there are things we're going to stop doing. To which you have to reply, well, what is it that you do that you're going to stop doing? Right. What are these crimes you're going to investigate that you are now investigating? Because we don't know what it is. Maybe the last thing they'll drop is their investigation of people's opinions on Twitter. But anything to do with what most of us regard as crime, they long ago stopped having anything to do with. And yet they write directly to the Prime Minister, you give us what we want, or we'll go on a sort of strike. It reminds me of the big unions in the days of the big union barons of the late 1970s.
Exactly. But the problem is that people now in this country have seen through most of the
situation that we're in. And where is the coherent, intelligent, thoughtful opposition?
Yeah. Well, there isn't any really at the moment. And the problem as well.
Well, how are they there?
Well, but people
they're so easily diverted.
Yeah.
Where is the thoughtful? Where's the thoughtful opposition here?
Yeah, well, as I said, there really isn't any, because at the moment people have lost faith. I mean, we're going to talk in a moment to Jack Elson, politically editor of The Sun, about a piece in The Sun today. Starmer is about to lose the public's trust. Once that happens, it's very hard to get it back. I mean, he's already lost the public's trust because nobody really believes a word that he says. They already don't believe a word that the Tories have said because they said it for 14 years and didn't do that. And even as they spoke, the business of our economy was crumbling all around them. Keir Starmer tells one lie after another now, quite blatantly and quite happily. Yesterday, he claimed that China was against the Chagos deal, when last week they actually said they were very much in favour of it. They thought it was a great deal. Quite blatantly and quite happily. Yesterday, he claimed... massive delay. Yeah. We've just lost Peter there. I'm sorry. There seems to be some kind of difficulty with the old communication devices. A bit of a delay. David Portsmouth says, Mike, the way that Starmer sought to belittle Sarah Poachin, a new member of Parliament, was disgraceful. For a seasoned politician like Starmer to treat the newest member in that way speaks volumes to his lack of respect for Sarah's position in the House and a complete exposure of his nasty, vindictive nature. And I think that's true. There's no question that whenever Keir Starmer is challenged, whenever he's given something to answer that he doesn't like, whenever he's sort of poked fun at, whenever he's criticised, he immediately searches for the nearest insult, like some thin-skinned child who can't be given any sort of difficult question to answer and who can't be given any difficult task to perform. He simply does not have the bandwidth to deal with it. He doesn't know how to answer these questions, and so he immediately just goes for the person who's asked the question. Christopher says this: Mike, what I want to know is whether those at the HMRC responsible for this loss of our money will receive fines and sanctions that we as taxpayers are constantly threatened with if we don't comply with all their rules and regulations. Exactly right. I mean, many of you will have suffered in the same way that I have in the last couple of months, where I sort of came back from my trip abroad to find that there was a tax demand on my doorstep to say that I'd somehow underpaid national insurance in April because, of course, national insurance went up in April. Now, as far as I know, my accountants took care of all that stuff, but obviously something slipped through the cracks. But meantime, all it means is, you've got to send them more money. It wasn't a vast amount, but the point is that all they do is come after you for more and more and more. I run a small business, as I'm sure many of you do listening to this. The VAT bills go up and up and up. I get no benefit from VAT. I charge VAT, I pay it to the government. I collect it basically for them. So if it wasn't for my business, they wouldn't have any money, because I give them free money, which I get generated because of the business that I do, and I then have to hand it all to them. The 20% VAT goes straight from whoever it is I'm charging the VAT to into my bank account and back out of it. I get no benefit. I get nothing for just literally money laundering for the government. That's what it feels like. If this lot were in power for 14 years, why didn't they do all of this then? And why would we believe them now, says Paul and Dunblane, talking about the Tories. And one from Andy from Notts, who says, another lying Tory, talking about Mel Stride this time. Nigel Farage said exactly where the money is coming from. Scrap net zero and drill, cancel foreign aid, stop hotels for migrants, put them in refugee camps and stop benefits to them. There were other things to which added quite a few billion. It was well resourced, what he said, but all these opposition are scared to death. I'm disappointed in you for not fighting back. Well, you shouldn't be disappointed in me, Andy. I did fight back. I said to him that Nigel Farage had, at the very least, laid out quite a lot of the ways that he would make that money available. But the bottom line is that you don't need to argue with people when they are making their own argument and in such a bad way. Sometimes it's better to let them just talk, and then you can be the judge of whether you think that they're right or wrong, and you've obviously decided that they're wrong. Richard says, about the burqa, I wonder how the facial recognition is going to work if people are wearing those. Well, that's a good question. Let's get a voice note from Angie.
Morning, Mike. Oh my God, shoot me now. Mel Stride going on about things not being costed by reform. In one sentence he's saying, oh, well, of course there's a lot of waste in government, blah, blah, blah. You were there for 14 years and you knew there was all this waste and you did nothing about it. But now, oh, all of a sudden, oh, yeah, we're going to sort all that out. I'm going out for a very long walk.
Angie, you better take an umbrella and some galoshes would be my advice, because it's not looking very nice out there. It's 16 minutes past 8. Kevin in the Isle of Wight says, Mike, the only thing stuttering Starmer managed to say in reply to Kemi Badenoch was that we're the only country not paying 50% tariffs on steel, without mentioning that the reason for that is thanks to Brexit. Well, exactly right. But of course, it's nothing to do with his incredible negotiation techniques. It's everything to do with the fact that Donald Trump is just messing around with people. By the way, have you seen the latest news from the United States of America? Donald Trump has signed a new travel ban targeting 12 countries following that terror attack in Colorado, where the Palestinian man decided it would be a great idea to chuck around a few Molotov cocktails in Colorado. He was in the country illegally. The ban takes place on the 9th of June, which is approximately 4 days from now. And it basically targets nationals of Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan and Yemen. I think we could do much worse than actually take that list and apply it to the dinghies and say, if you're coming from any of those countries, you are going to be immediately arrested and put in a detention centre until we can prove who you are and what you're coming here to do. Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan and Yemen. I bet you any money that would cut down on the illegal migrants in a stroke. Absolutely right. It's 8:17.
40 years, white British people will be a minority in their own country. That is not good. When did the people vote for that? I mean, that's a very serious question. They never voted for this. And the fact that we treat this as if it is completely normal is absurd. If I would show you a number that says Saudi Arabia will be majority Christian in 40 years, your question would be, why is that? What happened? What did the Saudis do? How could that take place? And in Britain, we say, well, this is then these weird BBC documentaries where they say, well, somehow Britain has always been a nation of coloured people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 20 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Explain to Mel Stride, please, that the Tories' policies have and will be rejected by us. What aren't they understanding, says Anna in Surrey. And John says, Mike, in East London there are plenty of women who are driving around with a full face covering. Isn't this dangerous? Well, you might think it would affect your peripheral vision, wouldn't you? I guess so. Morning, Mike, says David Melton Mowbray. Great show. Sorry, can't agree with Sarah's notion about banning Muslim women wearing a full face covering in public. It's no different than somewhere wearing a crash helmet at a petrol station or a young lad walking around with a balaclava with his hood up. Sorry, but we've got more important things to worry about, and this will only enrage and fuel the left, the dangerous left. All the best. Well, you know, I think the point is, Dave, that as we saw from the reaction of people in the House of Commons yesterday, it's something that perhaps we should be talking about and having a debate about. And you're entitled to a view, whichever view that is, by all means. But, you know, let's not pretend that we shouldn't talk about it, like Keir Starmer sort of shrunk away from it. Jack Elsom's here, new political editor, newly appointed political editor of The Sun. Jack, a very good morning to you. Congratulations on the new job. I know, technically speaking, you don't really start till next week, but we thought we'd just grab an early shot at it if we could.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, absolutely honoured to be the new political editor of The Sun. Hopefully it means that I can come on your show even more, and the pair of us can put the world to rights, as we always do. Yeah,
absolutely. Be very much looking forward to it. I mean, a great piece on page 10 of The Sun today by Leo McKinstry. Starmer is about to lose the public's trust. Once that happens, it's very hard to get it back, as several prime ministers have found out. What I would say is I think he's already lost the trust of the public, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, I think this is the great fear now in number 10. I think by their own admission, the start of Keir Starmer's premiership after last July went very downhill very quickly. Yeah. And you had the winter fuel cuts, you had giving massive pay rises to train drivers, all the stuff about freebies and Lord Alley's, row over Sue Gray. And I think that after 14 years of Tory government, people were at their wits' end. They were expecting a bit more, especially given all the sort of pontificating that Keir Starmer did in opposition, raising taxes and national insurance, and then using some sort of verbal gymnastics to say, actually, we didn't mean we were going to put up on businesses, we just meant we were going to put up on normal people. Well, most normal people are actually feeling the pinch of those national insurance tax rises. So I think that there was a great element of despair in the country. It does seem that after those local elections, when Labour got that massive kicking, they are now trying to recalibrate and almost trying to go after those reform voters who they are just bleeding in their droves to Nigel Farage at the moment. The problem I think Leo McKinstry articulates in this piece is that there's an authenticity issue with Keir Starmer. And he can say the right things, he can talk about Island of Strangers, he can talk about castrating paedophiles, but does he actually believe in this stuff? And I think that at the moment that's a big issue. And I think that, you know, once trust is lost, it's very, very hard to get back.
Yeah, and he is being painted now by most commentators as a kind of a bit of a cipher, not really anything like a proper politician, more of a manager, somebody who tries to appease, you know, the views of various people in his own party, tries to appease the views of voters, you know, didn't know what to do when he lost massively in that local election back in May, and sort of suddenly pivoted to the right, then suddenly turned back to the left. He doesn't really know what he's doing on the two-child cap benefit. Doesn't know what he's doing on winter fuel allowance. Doesn't know really where the money's coming from. And it seems to me that every day there's a new announcement and there's a new tweet that gets put out by number 10. And it's full, inevitably, of untruths. You know, I mean, even yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions, he claimed that China were against the Chagos Islands deal, when it was very clear last week they came out and said, actually, we think it's a great deal.
Yeah, and it does seem he's exposed to the criticism, that he sort of just bends with the wind.
Yeah.
And for someone with such a big majority, you think about sort of the great prime ministers who wielded big majorities in our time, you know, sort of Attlee, Thatcher, Blair, the idea that they would be put off by doing something that they wanted to do because a handful of backbenchers are kicking up a stink about it is for the birds. You know, take something like welfare, for example. The public want to see the welfare bill come down. Now, I thought that Keir Starmer's £5 billion cut to the welfare budget was actually chicken feed, really. When you're talking about £100 billion in sickness benefits alone by 2030, it's not really very much. But the fact that we now have Keir Starmer suggestions that he might even water that down because some of his backbenchers are kicking off, you know, he's got 140 majority. You know, if he wanted to do something, he should just do it. And I think that, you know, listening to sort of the socialist campaign group and sort of the left wingers on his back benches, if he's going to be, you know, rocked around by them for the next 4 years, then he's going to be in real trouble.
Right.
And I think that he needs to actually sort of get more in tune with what the voters want rather than what some of his backbenchers want. He's got a big majority, he might as well use it. But on the Chagos deal, I think that many people, like you said, are in absolute despair with this, because there does seem to have been some smoke and mirrors, some obfuscation. They've claimed that it's only going to be £3 billion across the 99-year period. It seems that actually some estimates say it could be up to £30 billion. But even besides that, a lot of people are getting very angry about the point that why are we paying for anything in the first place?
Well, exactly right. Let's have a quick look, because he looked very vulnerable yesterday, I thought, for the first time. He seemed lost for words. He seemed almost incapable of answering anything that Kemi Badenoch threw at him. And she, I thought, was on pretty good form. Have a look.
I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child benefit cap. He's talking about the Kremlin. He's saying everything he can to distract from the mess he is making of our economy. The OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public safe. Just as he's releasing more criminals onto the streets. His cabinet are squabbling with each other. They've said that they've lost control of the borders, but he still managed, Mr. Speaker, to find £30 billion to give away the Chagos Islands. This is total and utter chaos. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
The only advice, Mr. Speaker, she gets up on a Wednesday morning, scrolls through social media, never does any of it. We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. And we're working in the US, and that will be coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Please. Let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
Old Lindsay Hoyle was on form, wasn't he? I mean, even if you know you're not getting an answer, because that's the problem. He doesn't answer anything, does he?
Yeah, I mean, Kemi Badenoch definitely had her Weetabix yesterday. I mean, I think her some of her prime ministerial questions have been left wanting in recent weeks. But yesterday, I think she actually did hit the barn door and articulate what many people are feeling in this country. It's interesting, I think, especially. I thought that it was a deeply sort of weird attack line from Keir Starmer to sort of accuse her of giving the Kremlin talking points.
Yeah.
Because from what I saw with Kemi Badenoch, the original comment she made was saying that Ukraine are fighting a war on behalf of all of us in the West. And that seemed to be the point she was making. And Keir Starmer sort of picked up quite a bizarre attack line, saying the Kremlin jumped on this and said, it's an admission that they're fighting a proxy war on behalf of us. So I didn't really understand that one. I'm not sure that got much traction.
No.
I think what's interesting is the two-child benefit cap now, because that does seem to be actually some clear blue water between both the Tories and then Labour and Nigel Farage as well. And I think the Tories have been really sort of scrambling around, trying to find any way of cut through since Kemi Badenoch became leader last year. And I think that the two-child benefit cap could be one, because if you look at the polling, actually, with large parts of the public, it is quite popular keeping that. And if they're the only party articulating the fact that a lot of people don't want to pay for other people to have more children, then actually they could finally find an opening, because if Nigel Farage is saying we should scrap it, Keir Starmer almost certainly in the budget will say that we should at least water it down, or if not scrap it entirely, then it could provide an opening for Kelly Baden, not BS. I think she did a pretty good job yesterday at PMQs.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we just had Mel Stride on in the last hour, Shadow Chancellor, of course, and he wants to seemingly drag everybody back to the era of Liz Truss, and he said, you know, we need to move forward by apologising for what Liz Truss did. Liz Truss has answered by sort of slagging him off and saying that he was kind of yesterday's man. He never stood up for proper Conservative values. I mean, they seem incapable, the Conservatives, of not fighting with each other and realising that actually, you know, one, people don't trust them anymore, and they need to really do something to help people regain trust, otherwise they're finished. But instead, they seem to want to just carry on with this internecine row.
You speak to people inside the Conservative Party, and there does seem to have been a deliberate shift of strategy. I think at the very start, there was a tactic of, you know, forget about the past 14 years, there's a clean break, and let's just move on. But I think they realised very quickly the public aren't going to be willing to listen to what they have to say unless they basically flagellate themselves for the past 14 years or 5 years or so, and just make a very, very clear apology on behalf of what happened. So I think that's what we're seeing playing out now. And that is obviously, it's a high-risk strategy, because if you have Mel Stride going out in the airwaves pointing to people like Liz Truss, there is a danger that their poll ratings are going to go down before they get better. But I think that's a gamble which the Tory leadership want to pursue at the moment. They almost have to criticise themselves, crash their own record to say, hands up, we got it wrong. And then hopefully the public will buy that, and then they'll be in a position to actually try and rebuild with some sort of credibility. So I think that's what's happening at the moment. But as you said, it's just going to breed to infighting in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely right. Jack, great to see you. Great to talk to you. We'll be doing a lot more of it in the future, I'm sure. Jack Elsom, the new political editor at The Sun, the brand new political editor at The Sun, as was announced yesterday. And, of course, his predecessor, Harry Cole, is off to the United States of America to be North American editor. We expect that we'll be in touch with Harry an awful lot as well from the other side of the pond. Coming up, we'll hear from Donald Trump. We'll also be finding out exactly what the state of our roads is, because we're going to talk to Mr. Pothole. We haven't had him on for a while. He's wondering where all this money is gone that they said they were going to spend on fixing the potholes in the roads in this country. Glenn from Leeds says this, on PMQs, if you ever wanted to categorise a sound of 600 people clutching their pearls, it sounds just like that. So Keith, obsessed with Liz Truss, we're going to have to add her name to Labour's bingo card. Absolutely right. This is Talk. It's 8:32.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will join us. Talking of things that we didn't want to know about, this morning I had a very early message from somebody called Anon who was giving me a hard time because he said he was an alcoholic and he didn't like the idea that I was talking about the only way I can enjoy myself was to have a drink, which was not technically what I had to say. Anon, says George, is typical of those who give up something enjoyable because it doesn't agree with them. They don't want others to enjoy it. As an ex-smoker for 40 years and a very moderate drinker, I find generally that those who smoke and drink are more interesting than the abstainers. Anon, take your offence and stick it where the sun doesn't shine. Fair enough. And one more from Joe, who says, morning Mike, I'm off to Cyprus today and check the hotel reviews on TripAdvisor, only to find people warning about economic migrants camping outside it. Opposite. Still, at least over there, they're not being put in the hotels like they are here. Yeah, well, possibly not. One from who is it? Mike, I think. Transcript from Starmer talking to Rachel. Starmer, Rachel, thanks, Rachel, Keir, yeah, you can imagine the conversation. He goes, Bill and Ben made more sense. Absolutely right. Now, just before we move on and talk to Mark Morell, a.k.a. Mr. Pothole, have a look at Donald Trump, because we mentioned earlier that he's basically put a travel ban now on 12 different countries. Here's him announcing it.
Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States. That is why today I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others. The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world. But we will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe. Thank you very much.
And that's how you do it. You say, you're actually banned from coming in if you're from Afghanistan, if you're from Eritrea, if you're from the Republic of Congo. And all the human rights lawyers will jump up and down and say, this is not fair. Yeah, well, tough. Until you can guarantee that the people coming to this country are not going to do us harm, then I'm afraid none of you will be allowed in. And I think that's a perfectly valid policy, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from Sasha.
Morning, Mike. It's Sasha from Cheshire. I'm just responding to your point about HMRC and all the issues. I've had ongoing issues with them since I was due a tax refund of nearly £2,500. I've had to call them on several different occasions. I have now had to escalate things to the customer response team so that they can find a resolution for me within the next 2 weeks. And when I spoke to the person on the phone there, who was very clearly also working from home, they said that if after 2 weeks nothing has been done, they will have to escalate it further to a formal complaint. But this is money that I should never have paid in the first place. And like you said, when you owe them money, they don't stop coming after you and berating you for that payment. But when it's the other way round, it's a very, very different set of rules. And I'm just fed up of it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's a one-sided game, isn't it? You have no power, and it's ludicrous. I mean, I've got many stories to tell you about the tax man. Maybe now's not the time. We'll save it for when we've got nothing much else to talk about. Today, we've always, as ever, got loads to talk about. Mark Morell's here, a.k.a. Mr. Pothole, pothole campaigner of old. He's been campaigning as long as I can remember, back in the sort of 10, 20 years ago he's been doing it. Mark, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
You said to me just the other day, now we've got all these spending reviews coming up. We've got the government sort of allocating money right, left and centre. How much for the police, how much for the Home Office, how much for net zero, blah-de-blah. I mean, Starmer promised a load of money for potholes. What's actually happening?
Well, they supposedly were a record amount of £1.6 billion. Well, it wasn't a record amount because back in 2021, 2022, it was £1.7 billion by the previous Conservative government. I mean, we've got a £17 billion backlog in road maintenance that's costing the economy £14.4 billion a year. At a spending review, surely we should be looking at investing in things like the lack of road maintenance that could save the country money. I mean, that's an economic common sense view, as far as I'm concerned. They're going to spend, you know, what's estimated at the moment at £9 billion for the Lower Thames crossing. I mean, by the time that finishes, it's probably enough to get rid of the road maintenance backlog and save people money, save the economy money. I mean, unfortunately, don't seem to understand you have to invest to save. I mean, they talk about a money tree with Conservatives. It seems that Labour must have a money orchard of some sort. I mean, I despair, really. I mean, because unless we actually start resurfacing our roads on an annual basis, I mean, I'll be here for the rest of my life, and probably my great grandson will be on here as well. You know, it beggars belief. I mean, they're all looking for this magical cure for potholes, and there are some good techniques. There's a new one called Road Patch I'm looking at, which is basically you do a pothole repair, and the area around is normally bad, and that's when you get a failure. Well, this is like a roll of asphalt that you put on a roof to protect it. It would extend the life and stop failures around it. So that looks interesting. It's been used in other countries for about 7 years. We're sort of picking up on it here. I mean, it's just going through its approvals. So I'm very interested in those sort of things. But the ultimate thing is to resurface our roads that they seem to ignore.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's have a look at what Starmer actually said when he talked about potholes.
This is pothole damage.
You can see it, yeah.
Hit a pothole and it just ruins the sidewalk.
Picture a pothole. If it's strong enough to
basically, yes, it will be.
I've lost at least 3 tyres down to potholes, twice in 2 months.
First thing we need to do is get a bit of accountability into it to know which councils are doing what where, how many times they're filling in holes, so we can get a bit of data on that, which we haven't got. But what we're announcing today is to incentivise them to get on and do it.
We obviously have customers day in, day out coming in with the same issues, and I think having spoken to a man who can actually, you know, bring change and make something happen about it, you know, that can only be a positive thing for him to come in and see it in real terms.
I had to change all of my tyres at the end, and it's quite nice that we see things done to fill in the potholes at the moment.
Here's the thing. He said he was going to collect data, right? But has he collected any data? Do you know whether he knows which councils are doing what?
Well, that's a nonsense, really, Mike, because the data is how many potholes have you repaired? Well, that doesn't say if it's temporary, permanent, semi-permanent. So you can collect data, but at the end of the day, the only data you need is using the things like AI, which I've done some trials to stay in the app, where people can drive around and survey the roads. That's the real data. Yeah. AI will tell them they've got a massive problem. Well, they know that. They just don't want to do anything about it.
Right.
And also
I mean, my sat-nav on my car, right, tells me when there's a pothole coming up. It's not rocket science, literally. I mean, they could just map it from that, couldn't they?
Yeah, there's loads of data out there. They just don't. It's just an excuse. I mean, Starmer wants to fill potholes with hot air, like most politicians. I mean, if he actually wants to come out for a ride with me in some of the locations not too far from me, I can show him roads that are failing at repair. I think the only answer really is for a revolt and start issuing legal notices on authorities, which I've done before successfully. And I'm looking at a case now where I've been contacted by some people who are having problems with their Airbnb, actually getting cancellations because of the state of the road. I mean, it's affecting people's livelihoods. I mean, you know, they won't talk to me, Mike, because at the end of the day, they don't really want to do anything about it. I'm appalled at Lillian Greenwood. She was an excellent chair of the Transport Select Committee when I did some work with them. She got in position of a road minister, and it's all the same old rubbish platitudes, you know. Yeah. And do the Department of Transport want to do anything? You know, God forbid you actually do any more and do your job better.
Yeah. I mean, there we were yesterday watching Rachel Reeves announcing, you know, new trams and new buses and, you know, electric carbon-free, emissions-free transportation networks in Manchester. Andy Burnham could barely, you know, keep his pants on. He was so excited. And he's going, you know, I mean, but they're not interested in cars, are they? They don't care about car drivers.
Well, and also buses use the road. I mean, I've had there's instances where I've sent pictures of buses that have been damaged as a result of potholes.
Yeah.
And this thing about spreading the money down from the south to the north, okay, I had some sympathy with that. But surprise, surprise, potholes are across the country. If you actually spent the money across the country, it would actually help economic areas. You could create apprenticeships. There's some really good tools out there now that means that it's less unfavourable for people to go into the things like the JCB Pro, more modern techniques. Some of the surface dressing machines are all controlled by iPads and things. So you need to get a young workforce because for every 10 older guys that worked on roads retiring, there's about one coming into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, listen, keep up the good work, Mark. All you can do is continue to fight the good fight, and we're very grateful for it. Thank you very much indeed. Pothole campaigner there, Mr. Pothole, a.k.a. Mark Morell. John McLean says this, I've been dry for 40 years and led a very happy life. There are two types of dry alcoholics, those who give up and are utterly miserable, and those who give up and enjoy the rest of their lives. Those who are miserable have not really recovered from their addiction. Margaret in Birmingham says, when will the penny drop with Rachel from Accounts? We are bored with her stage speeches. Reeves and Starmer, the duo. More, please. Mike, thank you very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Damon on the Tories.
Morning, mate. Damon from Wigan. Isn't it amazing that when the Conservative Party are now the opposition party, they've got all the answers that they should have been doing when they was in government. They've got all the answers of how they're going to fix everything. All the answers of you vote for us and we'll get back in power and we'll make sure that you're okay. And we've got the answer to everything, the economy and how to run the country and everything's bang on. They have 14 years of a complete disaster. But yet they try and give everybody the spin on how they could be, how they are the party of the future. Do they really think we're stupid? Do these politicians really think that the British public will just fall for anything what they say?
Yeah, I mean, you do wonder, don't you? You have to wonder if they actually really see what the real world is going on out there in the big wide world, if they ever actually get out of Westminster. Absolutely incredible stuff. Mike says, Stuart, with the fuel allowance U-turn, Reeves has painted herself into a corner by claiming it's because the finances are better. Reeves can't now raise taxes in her next budget, claiming the economy is worse than expected. This is the thing, they don't think through what they're actually saying. They're trying to cover their backsides and say, well, this is not really a U-turn. What we're doing here is we're giving some of the money back that we took off you because now the economy's in better shape. Of course the economy's not in better shape. Everybody knows that. Everybody doesn't believe it. But she thinks that she can get away with it because she thinks people have got a short memory, which they haven't. Bill in Cheshire says, the US trade deal, if we had a deal, we would have the terms of a deal. We would have a document detailing the deal, allowing public scrutiny. The only deal we have at present is having to listen to these bunch of liars and wafflers. True. Exactly right. If there was a deal, we would know exactly what it's all about. Mel says this, can the chap behind Rachel Thieves be found and offered a chat on your show? I'd love to know what was going through his head. Great shows ever. Well, we're going to try and get a hold of him. We don't know whether we can. He was at a Rochdale bus company, and there he is, shuffling around shiftily, looking suspiciously at Rachel Reeves, raising his eyebrows, occasionally shaking his head, occasionally scratching his head, occasionally like looking just as though he would rather be almost anywhere rather than listening to that absolute and utter bilge from Rachel from Accounts. Absolutely incredible stuff. Coming up, we're going to talk to Ash Regan, north of the border. She's MSP for Eastern Edinburgh from the Alapa Party. We'll see what's going on up there.
Is that a real baby bump, or has she strapped it on? She's got form for strapping on baby bumps. So what do you think as you see it? I think
there's something very wrong with that shape, in my view. I don't know. Look, I'm mesmerised, but I'm kind of. Do you know what I'm thinking? I'm glad the Queen is no longer with us, because oh my Lord, how she would be shuddering at those images. It's so undignified.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 10 minutes to 9. Here's one for you. It's in the Daily Star. Apparently the Holy Grail may have been found. According to the Daily Star front page, it says the hunt is on in the UK. Apparently it's a new documentary which is being done by Mark Christopher Lee, who's been staggering around looking at things up and down the country. His movie is called The Last Grail Hunter, which features EastEnders star John Altman. It's going to have its premiere at the Rain Dance Film Festival in London later on this month. He reckons that the Holy Grail is in St Albans, which it may well be. I can't say. This from Sue from Essex. A great show. Ray the Burka. I find it intimidating. I wonder what would happen if everyone wore one. CCTV would be made redundant. That's true. Morning, Mike. Didn't one of the 7/7 bombers or another escape the UK as he had a burqa on, says Debs in Lincolnshire. That's right, absolutely, because it was attempted Warren Street bomber Yassim Omar, who was pictured fleeing London after the July the 21st attempt at bombing, which was the second one after 7/7. He was dressed as a woman wearing a burqa. He was linked to the other 7/7 bombings as well. CCTV footage the following day showed him passing through Golders Green coach station in North London and stepping off in Birmingham several hours later. I'm pretty sure if it was not him, there was somebody else who did it as well and managed to actually smuggle themselves out of the country because they were wearing a burqa, which does tend to think and suggest that it's not the greatest of ideas for national security. Meanwhile, before we talk to Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern for the Alpha Party, let's tell you about this. We're giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets, thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com. Let's talk now to Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern, up there for the Alpha Party. Ash, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I hope you got better weather than we've got. It's absolutely pouring here. We're not looking forward to going out after the show, but there we are. Let's talk about independence, shall we? Because obviously it's on the agenda once again, as John Swinney kind of, tries to re-establish the SNP as the government of the day after all the troubles that they've had. What's the current sort of belief up there in terms of polls and things like that?
Well, the latest poll was just last week, so it was an Orstat poll, and it put support for independence at 54%. So that does show, I think it would be reasonable for me to then say that that is the majority opinion of the people of Scotland. The issue that we've got with it is there's no way for Scotland to make that choice in a way that would give us that democratic mandate to go ahead and negotiate Scotland's exit, or Skexit maybe as you might call it, from the UK. Now the SNP, obviously the main party of independence, their long held position or their strategy on independence is to get another independence referendum. They think that that's the best way to go about it. The problem with that is that it relies on the Westminster government. In this case, it's Starmer, but I think it's been 4 or 5 consecutive previous prime ministers who've just said no. So they've said, even though the SNP have demonstrated the support of the people by the fact they've been winning election after election, they're not prepared to grant another independence referendum. And of course, then what do you do then? You're at a bit of an impasse. There's nowhere to go. Right. So interestingly, though, in the last week, Starmer has said that John Swinney, who's the new SNP First Minister, hasn't raised independence with him or even asked for a referendum in the time that he's been talking to him. I think many people who vote SNP for independence, or they want to get independence, would be very surprised and I think very concerned to hear that.
Yes, I imagine they would. Let's talk about your own bill on prostitution, which got a lot of attention in the last couple of weeks and last month in particular. Tell us about that.
Yes, I've just introduced it to the Scottish Parliament. Up here, it's called a members' bill, so I'm doing it myself. It's not a government bill. I'm attempting to change the law on prostitution to rebalance it, in my opinion. So it's got 4 main pillars, what I'm seeking to do, and it would criminalise the purchase of sex, it would decriminalise the sale of sex, and quash previous convictions that are linked to prostitution, and it would also offer support for people that are involved in prostitution and support to exit if they should so wish. It's an attempt to switch the balance of criminality away from those who sell sex, which the data shows about 96% female, to those who buy sex, who are about 99% male, because we believe that the buying of sex in prostitution is very damaging for those that are involved in it, and also it drives trafficking to come into the country, and it sort of expands that whole market of prostitution, drives sex trafficking, which in turn means that more and more people are brought into the industry and then, very much harmed by it. There was one study that I saw on people who'd been through prostitution, which showed that their rates of PTSD were at 70%. That is higher than we see in combat veterans and is equivalent to what we would see for victims of state torture. So I think sometimes people get this idea that, prostitution is all glamorous and, it's safe and it's people's choice. The experience of the majority of people who are in prostitution, and majority of women and girls that are in prostitution, is they often enter as children. So average age is sometimes 13 or 14. A lot of them have been through the care system, and some of them have been victims of child sex abuse. So, it's very much not a choice. And then, of course, you have those that have been trafficked. So they've been trafficked in from other countries. Scotland's main source countries are like countries in Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, places like that, Romania, and then also Vietnam and Africa.
Right. And so what sort of chance have you got of getting that through, getting that approved?
Technically, we do have enough time, so we obviously have to finish up before the Scottish election, and that means the Parliament usually dissolves around about middle to end of March next year.
Yeah.
So we've got enough time to get it through if we get a move on. I am getting support from colleagues. I obviously need a simple majority at stage 1 in order for the bill to progress on to the next stage. The only way I can gauge whether it might be successful is the fact that I got the cross-party support very, very quickly. So I needed to get 18 members of the Scottish Parliament to support me in order to even get the right to introduce the bill. And that is where bills of this, on this subject, there have been a few over the last 25 years, have failed to get to that point. And I achieved that cross-party support in about, I think it was 2 or 3 days, so very quickly. So I think that shows there is an interest, at least in debating the topic and, talking about it in the main chamber.
Yeah, always a good thing. Good to see you, Ash. Thanks very much indeed. Ash Regan there, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern from the Alapa Party. Mike, on the defence review, says Bill in Cheshire, if we are on a war footing, surely every NATO member should be also. Have any other NATO members said they are? If not, it must be Starmer BS then. Well, unfortunately, there is an awful lot of that going on. Ernie says this, morning, Mike, this net zero debacle is just plain ridiculous. Britain is acting like a new car owner. There's fags but crisp packets, fast food boxes flying out all over the windows, but they boast about how clean their car is inside. It's just a load of nonsense, and it's going to be an economic disaster for Britain. Well, you know, I don't think I can disagree with a word of that. And of course, as long as both the Tories and Labour continue down this net zero route, it's going to be perilous not only for most of our incomes, but also for the economy in general. I don't understand why Starmer has caved on this one. We'll talk to Dan Hodges coming up in the next hour and find out what he makes of the week in power for Keir Starmer. I think it's been one of his worst ever. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll bring you loads more after the news right here on Talk.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? And we'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9, and I have to tell you, it is not a beautiful morning this morning, I'm afraid. It is Thursday the 5th of June, however, as we edge ever closer to the weekend, and I think it's going to be a bit rainy. But don't worry, they found the Holy Grail, they think, in St Albans. So if you've got anything better to do, you can pop up there and see if you can get your hands on one of the Rosicrucian's most famous artefacts. I don't know what happens if you find the Holy Grail. I'm not sure whether it grants you sort of eternal happiness or anything, I don't know. But you can get eternal happiness right here on Morning Glory, because there's a podcast that comes out right after the show when it finishes every single weekday morning around about 10:15. Best of the show. If you missed a bit of it, you know, it's a disgrace, quite frankly, but if you do, you can always catch up with our podcast on Morning Glory. It's always there. Morning Mike says, Paul in Exeter, but he's not in Exeter. He says, I'm currently holidaying in the Canary Islands. I'm contemplating asking for political asylum. Well, I don't blame you, because back here it's going all over the place. It's all going I can't even say it. I nearly said something bad there, but you know what I mean. It's all going wrong, basically. But Rachel Reeves doesn't know what she's doing, right? She doesn't actually know whether she's got money or she hasn't got money. Yesterday she announced that she's going to spend 15 billion quid on a few electric trams, some electric buses and some trains. Meanwhile, you know, the nationalisation of the railway doesn't go terribly well. If you remember, the first ever renationalised South West train turned out to be a replacement bus service. That was last week. We've got lots more news on that front. There's a U-turn coming on the winter fuel allowance, not because they made a mistake, not because they got it wrong, not because everybody at the doorstep told them that's why they lost massively in the local elections in May. Oh no, nothing to do with that. They're doing it now because, of course, the economy's doing better. And as somebody just pointed out, they can't now complain that they have to put taxes up because the economy's in such a bad way, because they've just said the economy's getting better. This is how bad they are. Dan Hodges is here. He's going to be telling us exactly what he thinks of the week that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have had. Let's have a listen to her trying to announce the U-turn on winter fuel.
Had to make decisions last year to restore sound public finances, and that involved a number of difficult decisions around welfare, taxation, and also public spending, including the decision to means test winter fuel payments, so only the poorest pensioners, those on pension credit, got it. But we have now put our public finances on a firmer footing. The economy is in a better shape, but we have also listened to the concerns that people had about the level of the means test. And so we will be making changes to that. They will be in place so that pensioners are paid this coming winter, and we'll announce the detail of that and the level of that as soon as we possibly can. But people should be in no doubt that the means test will increase and people will get, more people will get winter fuel payment this winter.
Yeah, wasn't a mistake there, was it? Certainly not a mistake. Oh, no, no, no. The economy's in much better shape. You can see it, can't you? Everywhere you look. You know, there's only, what, 3 pubs closing every hour now, and there's only something like, you know, 1,500 people being made redundant every month. You know, everything's going so well now. But they won't be able to now go back on that, will they? They'll have to now admit that the economy is going so well, they won't have to tax us anymore. Just a bit of breaking news, by the way. There's been an incident on Ryanair, a flight that went between Berlin to Milan late on Wednesday. The pilot was forced to make an emergency landing to help save the 179 passengers and 6 crew members on board due to the severity of the weather. It turns out that there were some really bad storms over southern Germany apparently yesterday evening. 8 passengers and 1 member of the crew were injured as the plane attempted to land safely in Bavaria. Apparently there were chaotic and dangerous scenes in mid-air. People were sort of flung against the ceiling, which can only suggest that of the plane they weren't wearing their seatbelts. Presumably, if you need first aid on Ryanair, they charge you an extra £5. I don't know, just a guess. Let's talk to Dan Hodges. Oh, actually, we've got a voice note from Pete first, have we? Go on.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
It's actually uncanny. That is actually him. I mean, obviously not the first bit, but the second bit is actually him. Dan, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, you know, it goes from bad to worse, doesn't it? But it's one of my very eagle-eyed viewers has spotted the hole in Rachel Reeves' argument yesterday, because now that she said that the economy's in better shape and that's why they can now give some of the winter fuel money back, she can't now claim that it's in such bad shape she's going to put taxes up.
Well, I mean, I'm not entirely sure Rachel Reeves has got any argument at all. I mean, it was very amusing yesterday watching that clip and watching the guy standing behind it, you know, wanting to be absolutely anywhere but there. But look, I mean, it's just absolutely preposterous argument that the government is putting forward, which is that the U-turn on winter fuel is coming because they've stabilised the economy. We know these are facts. Borrowing is up. Growth is being downgraded. Rachel Reeves' fiscal headroom has been eroded. Everybody knows she's going to have to break her pledge not to come back for additional taxes. She's going to have to announce next week significant cuts in numerous government departments. as you said in the run up to this, we've got the reports today about how she's now being openly defied by and has been beaten by Ed Miliband in the internal debate over net zero. We've seen her being openly defied by Angela Rayner. The reality is Rachel Reeves is now Chancellor in name only. Her credibility has been destroyed, and Keir Starmer's going to have a very, very significant decision to make when he comes up to the reshuffle, because he can cling on to her, but the reality is eventually, sooner rather than later, he's going to have to get rid of her because she has zero credibility left. And desperately clinging on to her in the hope that, you know, something will turn up, or clinging onto her because there's a perception that moving his chancellor would in some way undermine his own authority, just isn't really going to cut it. The reality is the Rachel Reeves experiment in government has failed, and everybody knows it. And the kindest thing he could do for her now and for the country would be to move her.
Yeah, but you've said in the past that if he did that, that would reflect badly on him, which I think it will, because he chose her. He was the one that was so happy, wasn't he? Do you remember? And she's a woman, you know, for the first time we have a woman chancellor, and he had that ridiculous smile on his face. But you always said that would damage his reputation and his position as Prime Minister because she was his choice.
No, absolutely, and it will. But the point is, what's damaging him more is the complete collapse of his chancellor's own credibility. Yeah. And this is not just a political issue. Obviously, the government has got itself into a sort of a political coffin corner where it just doesn't have any moves left. Right. Either Reeves breaks her pledge to raise taxes, which will further destroy her confidence with business and the wider sort of global economic community, or she, as a number of people are now saying, she basically breaks or tears up her fiscal rules, in which case that will destroy her credibility, or she just tries to plough on with the strategy she's already pursuing, in which case her credibility with her own colleagues and with the country is destroyed. But either way, there is no way out for Rachel Reeves now. The only solution, as I say, is for Keir Starmer to move her by moving her effectively, drawing a line under all the pledges she made, which we now know she's not going to be able to meet, and then basically attempting to reset the economic strategy of the government, and by doing so reset the political strategy. Yeah.
I mean, it's been a pretty bad week again for Keir Starmer. You know, it started off with his strategic review, which kind of didn't go well at all. You know, it started with John Healey on Sunday doing the rounds, kind of unable to commit to anything other than an ambition to get to 3%, and most of it in the next Parliament, which many people don't believe the Labour government will even have. And then it went to the point where John Healey was questioned about the submarines and how many and how much, and he didn't know the answer to that. Nobody knows whether it's 12 or 10 or 9 or 7 or 1 or none, you know, and it looks as though all this talk of being on a war footing was simply sort of sabre rattling, trying to frighten people in order to prepare them for more taxes. So, I mean, again, the whole project seemed very ill thought through.
Absolutely. I mean, of all of them, actually, I find this one the most incomprehensible. I mean, you and I and everybody in Westminster knows just how much stall Labour have been putting on, saying, and Keir Starmer's putting on, a core part of his strategy was, we've moved away from the Corbyn era. Yeah. We've moved away from the era where Labour was weak on defence, couldn't be trusted on national security. I've changed my party, right? That was a fundamental part of his strategy. Yeah. We, as you said, have had a situation in which month after month, we had the statement back, I think it was in January, wasn't it? This emergency statement from Keir Starmer. We have to react now to the Russia threat. We have to react to the fact that the United States are no longer going to underwrite NATO. We need, as you say, to move on to a war footing. We need a programme of emergency rearmament. Yeah. That is how great the threat is. We have literally said we have to prepare for war. He literally said that last week.
He did.
Then he's asked, well, OK, But to meet that threat by your own analysis and NATO analysis and other people's analysis, you have to at least have a minimum of 3% of GDP spent on national defence. NATO says 3.5%, and the United States say 5%. He then, Keir Starmer, says, yes, I accept that. But then when he's asked, will he devote those resources, he says no.
Right.
No, I just don't understand that. I wrote about this week. There have been instances in the past where British prime ministers have failed to recognise the nature of the threat facing us from our enemies abroad. There have been times in the past where prime ministers have frankly lied to the country and themselves about the scale of that threat so they could actually spend resources on other political priorities. This is the first time I can remember where a prime minister has said, yes, we're facing this major threat. It's an existential threat. Putin's coming to get us. The Chinese could be coming to get us. We're on the brink of war, but I may not actually bother to provide the resources to fight that war or deter aggression because I may have other priorities like breakfast clubs or scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. It's just incomprehensible. And as you said, we had a situation on Saturday where the Defence Secretary said, yes, we will definitely meet 3%. Yeah. At which point the Treasury turned around and said, no, we won't. And the Prime Minister said, no, we won't. I mean,
it's really amateurish. It seems to me that, I mean, they can't use the excuse anymore that they weren't sure. They thought they were all ready for government. We were playing that clip again this week. We're prepared for government. Should we be honoured enough to be elected, we will be a government of service. And that was all before Lord Ali, before, the whole business of Sue Gray, all of the stuff that we've already forgotten about, in the beginning. But they can't now say, well, we're still a bit new at this. They've been doing it for 11 months. Pretty soon it's going to be a year they've been in charge, and they don't seem to know how to do anything.
Absolutely, but on this one, it's not just incompetence. I mean, obviously, it's appalling spin, appalling presentation. Okay, fine, but we're kind of getting used to that with them. This is, if you take Keir Starmer at his word, this is criminal negligence because the primary function of every government is to defend is national security, is to defend the nation from external threats. Now, there are a lot of people I know who think Keir Starmer is completely over-exaggerating, that the threat from Putin isn't the threat from Putin, the threat from China isn't the threat from China that is faced. It's all being talked up. Everyone's getting hysterical. We should be using money in other areas. Fine, that's a legitimate argument. But that's not Keir Starmer's argument.
No.
Keir Starmer's argument is literally, we are on the brink of war. We need to deter Russia and China from aggression that could potentially plunge the entire world into nothing less than World War III. But then he's turning around and saying, yeah, but I might not actually do anything about it after all. I'll see if we can, in 10 years, we can drum up the cash to stop World War III. But just to let you know, I may not.
Yeah.
And the key thing is this. What signal does that send now? Putin is literally sitting here thinking, I mean, literally, we had Trump saying this weekend he's going to respond to the Ukrainian drone attacks.
Yeah.
We know Putin is thinking, should I carry on in Ukraine? Potentially, should I invade Moldova? Potentially, should I invade the Balkans? Potentially, should I even invade Poland? We know for a fact China are sitting there thinking, should we invade Taiwan? And a major part of the calculations in whether or not they're going to do that is the extent to which they think the West has the political will and the resources to stand up against them if they do. Now, when they hear Starmer saying, yeah, I know we're supposed to be spending 3% on GDP on defence, 3.5%, 5% on defence, but I'm really sorry. I've got to give Ed Miliband money to insulate everyone's homes.
Right.
What are they thinking? What calculation?
Shortly before they get evaporated by a nuclear blast.
I mean, it's just nuts.
It's insane. But this is the thing.
Mad.
You can't... And it's also, I think it's actually quite irresponsible and disingenuous, because there will be people who will wake up and see those headlines and watch the news and say, oh, blimey, you know, Russia's attacking us every day, which is, again, what Healy said. And, you know, we've got to prepare for war. And some people would have taken that very seriously and gone, this is a nightmare. This is awful. You know, what are we going to do? People worry about their kids, their grandkids, you know. I think it's really irresponsible. For them to use their kind of normal spin to spin something this important, I think is a really, I think, unforgivable move.
It's just incredible. It's like, you know, it's like I said in my piece. It's like Winston Churchill standing up in 1940 and saying, you know, we'll fight in the air, we'll fight in the landing grounds, but we might not fight in the beach on the beaches and in the street, because we may not have the cash, and I might have to spend the money somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we might have to surrender after all.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's a binary issue. Either you say there isn't this threat and we can afford to spend our resources in other areas, and let's be honest, a lot of members of the public would prefer the resources to be spent in other areas. I completely understand that.
Yeah.
Or you say, no, there is a threat. This is the primary, there is an existential threat. This is the primary responsibility of government, is to meet it. And I will commit today to spending whatever it takes to keep this country safe. Now, you can have either argument. The problem is Keir Starmer's saying, we've got the threat, but I may not spend the money after all.
Yeah, bizarre. I mean, and as for fighting them on the beaches, I mean, given what's actually going on the beaches, they could never use that one, could they?
Well, exactly.
But I mean, the final ignominy, I suppose, today came for me. I don't normally look to Madame Tussauds for my political punditry, but for Madame Tussauds to come out and say we're not actually going to make a waxwork of the current Prime Minister because we're not sure how relevant he's going to be going forward.
Well, I mean, the way things are going, I mean, I wish they would make them waxwork, because it'd do a better job, wouldn't it?
Well, exactly.
I mean, it'd certainly do a better job in communicating the government's policies.
I know, but I mean, I'm starting to hear people now saying that Starmer isn't going to last. I mean, I've been saying it, as you know, for about 7 or 8 months, but I think it's now more true than ever. I wonder exactly how long he's got.
Look, we've got to be honest. He's got a huge majority. The Tories are in a complete mess, but and I've been saying this for a long time. People need to understand that the discontent within the Labour Party, amongst Keir Starmer's MPs, amongst the cabinet, and increasingly amongst Labour activists, is much, much worse than is popularly perceived outside. You know, we had the Angela Rayner thing. The reason Angela Rayner did that was because she knew she could, because she knew Starmer was weak. She knows Reeves is weak. She saw an eye for the main chance, and she was positioning herself. And she was positioning herself for a reason, because she thinks there is a possibility that there's going to be an opening sometime in the next few years.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that, and maybe even sooner than that. Dan, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Dan Hodges, the commentator from the Mail on Sunday. We're talking about fighting on the beaches and the real danger of all the migrants who are coming in now by their thousands. I mean, one good thing for, I suppose, Yvette Cooper is if the weather's a bit crappy for the next few days, maybe they won't come in quite such big numbers. This one, though, from Lee, who says, I love your show. Watch from Melbourne, Australia every night with my hubby, who's originally from the UK. Visited London in May, arrived on a cruise ship, was shocked that border control did not scan my passport, just a visual check of my new ESTA form, plus a check that my photo matched. I wondered how they would know if I'd actually left the country. I figure that the only notification would be the cruise line alerting government that a person missed the ship. I was really shocked. Have a good day. Exactly right. And Peter in Seaham Harbour says, don't the French realise that if they stopped the boats, there'd be less immigrants going through France? They go through there to get here. Duh. Well, you might think they would think that. But I think they've got such a big migrant problem in central France that they're not even worried that much about what happens on the border with the English Channel, because quite frankly, whoever of those people that make it to there and leave, they're quite happy about that. But I get your point. I mean, if they were sensible, they would say, look, a lot of people come through France simply to get to Britain, but there's an awful lot of people that just get into France and don't leave. They stay there. Because they've got a big problem. There's a massive piece in the Mail this week saying that, France, in many ways, is on the brink. After Paris Saint-Germain won the Champions League at the weekend and there was a massive riot, 2 people died, migrants took part in an awful lot of it. France is as much of a tinderbox, if not more, than it's ever been this summer. And you know what they like. They love a riot in France. So don't be too surprised if there's more riots in France this summer, because it is literally, politically, very much teetering on the brink. This is Talk.
We're in a propaganda tornado at the moment, coming from the other side, if I may say, call it that, which I think I should. And the reason is that Israel is close to winning. And the reason it's close to winning is that it's tackling the issue of aid. All of this propaganda is attracted to the issue of aid. And the reason is that until now, the UN has been bringing in the aid. Hamas, the UN is compromised by Hamas. Many of the UN, 1,200 of them, actually are members of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Hamas takes the aid from the UN and then sells it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 9:27 is the time. Listening to Starmer stuttering like a seal yesterday makes me think Kemi should throw him a fish. Great show as always, Mike. Keep up the good work, says Graham in Sunderland. And Mike says, I've seen two people on separate occasions in London dressed in the full burqa and the lower face mask had slipped, revealing a moustache. Are you sure? Here's Paul with a voice note.
Good morning, Mike. Paul in Hartlepool. I referenced Sarah Poachin's question yesterday, which the civil rights lawyer didn't even have the decency to answer. Imagine you're an armed police officer dealing with a terrorist incident and you've got to wait between 1 and 2 hours possibly before the SAS or the SBS get there. So you're dealing with these terrorists and your description is IC4 males or whatever, you know, masked males, and they've gone to ground and they change and wear burqas. And then they hide the weapons under the burqas. So those police officers are at a disadvantage then. And it strikes me that even if they did engage any terrorists, which they thought were wearing burqas or whatever, there'd be a whole queue of civil rights lawyers queued up alongside Starmer, Hermer and Sands to prosecute them. They haven't thought this through, and at least it deserves discussion in Parliament.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree more, Paul. It's madness not to want to discuss it. You know, the idea that everybody in Parliament went, Oh, that's a difficult question, that. Alan in Middlesbrough says, my beautiful missus just asked me why the leftists unconditionally support the burqa, even lefty feminists putting a thumbs up to Muslim husbands forcing their wives to hide their faces in a burqa. Can you answer, please, Mike, as I struggled and sounded like Keir Starmer on PMQs. Well, it's clear that the feminists of this country, particularly the ones on the left wing of the debate, think that they can't attack anybody who's from an ethnic minority. Because it's, you know, haram, as they would say in the Middle East. They can't do it. It's forbidden, because for them, they have to say that everything multicultural is brilliant. It's fantastic. It's all good. You can't argue with them. Bit of breaking news for you. The bodies of a couple taken into Gaza by Hamas during the 7th of October attacks have been recovered by Israeli forces, according to Benjamin Netanyahu this morning. The Israeli Prime Minister said the bodies of husband and wife Agad Haggai, 72, and Judy Weinstein Haggai, 70, were recovered during a special operation by the Israeli military. And if that doesn't put things into perspective for you, I don't know what will. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. Heather Binning's here now, founder, though, of the Women's Rights Network, because a rather strange story came out yesterday in the Times. Mental health hospitals responsible for violent criminals have policies which allow biological male patients to self-identify as women, according to an audit recently published. Heather, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me on.
No, not at all. Thanks for joining us. This is a weird story, isn't it? Because I read it through and thought, what would be the point of this? You know, if you've got mental health hospitals allowing violent criminals to sort of judge and decide who they want to be and self-identifying as women or cats or whatever it is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It doesn't make any common sense at all, does it? And
No.
That's why it's extraordinary that over the last few years, this idea that what is more important is how people feel and how they perceive themselves to be, and therefore be treated in the same way, is more important than the real rights and common sense of what is safe. I mean, we know the same thing has happened in prisons. It's happened across the NHS. Women, already vulnerable women, are put in even more vulnerable situations by allowing this to happen. Now, I know the FOIs that were done prior to the Supreme Court judgment, which had made it absolutely clear that when it comes to single-sex care, then sex is the dominant factor, and we need to take that into account. So, you know, I'm hopeful that very shortly we'll see revised policies coming out that that put this squarely back in the land of make-believe, and common sense returns to everybody involved.
Well, you would like to think so, because, I mean, it's bad enough to have single-sex wards which allow, say, for example, a trans woman, effectively a man, to be, you know, put in a bed there where they're surrounded by women. But when you're dealing with violent criminals, you know, who may indeed have, you know, malice aforethought about women and who may wish to attack women and who may even have a history of attacking women, if you're going to allow them access to women's wards, it's completely and utterly insane. I mean, I know we're talking about people with mental health problems, but this is an insane policy, isn't it?
Well, this is absolutely, but you know, it has happened everywhere. These insane policies have happened, and as I said, already vulnerable women.
Yeah.
We did a report 2 years ago about rapes and sexual assaults across the hospitals in the UK.
Yeah.
And we inquired the police of the reported crimes. There were 6,500 rapes and sexual assaults in a 3.5-year period. 2,000 of those were rapes. They took place on hospital premises, and that included mental health hospitals. You know, so there has been no further follow-up to see exactly where these have occurred. Are they staff? Are they patients? I fully expect, particularly in these mental health institutions, that a lot of staff will be very vulnerable to this practice happening. What we've since discovered, of course, is that the data collection across the NHS is completely skewed. We've done a report which is incoherent and unsafe, which shows that you cannot rely on the sex marker in the patient's records to give you the true biological result. And so staff are in a very difficult position. I know there was a woman, an instance quoted of a woman who complained about a male being on her ward. This is not a mental health hospital, I have to say. And this was denied by staff. Now, when the staff have got a record of a patient, and that record says that patient is female, are they, they need to be able to rely on records in order to do their own job and to be safe themselves.
Right.
And we have followed this up from our report and further to the Supreme Court ruling. We've had good feedback from the government department to say that they are, considering it and looking at it, and yes, it's not acceptable. And that's about the data records only. But as I say, the Supreme Court ruling for the NHS Trust to be saying, well, we're going to wait and see what further guidance says. The law was always this. This is not a new law. Right. It always does. The Supreme Court has confirmed that this is the law, and these practices should immediately cease.
Right. Because it's unlawful, right? I mean, I said this at the time, because an awful lot of NHS trusts alone, out of all places in the public sector, seem to be very much sticking in the mud, as it were, and saying, well, we're not going to change our policies until we hear something different. Well, you have heard something different. As you say, it was always the law. It's now been sort of reinforced as the law. So they shouldn't be allowed to be able to break the law with impunity, should they?
They absolutely should not. These policies should be immediately withdrawn and sanity returned. As I say, the data collection is one weak link that they have to address urgently in order that staff can do the job properly. But we trust hospitals to look after ourselves and to look after our loved ones. We trust mental health hospitals that they will also look after us. Some are in there for a varying extremes of mental health illness. Right. And those in Broadmoor, that's quite terrifying that those prisoners, or who would effectively be prisoners, or who are held in Broadmoor, are accommodated on a ward according to their choice.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, they talk about, different sort of situations where individuals may be acutely unwell, in which case they would prevent them from going onto a single-sex ward as somebody with a different gender. But, of course, that would suggest that when they're not acutely unwell, even though they're violent, crazed criminals, they'll be all right to go on there. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
It doesn't make any sense. As I highlight, these are already vulnerable women, and this is adding to the vulnerability. That's the really... And it seems to be when these policies were produced, no thought at all was given to the women. The outcomes for women and how they might feel about this were not considered. It was purely... the consideration given to the wants of a few men in society.
No, exactly right. Good to talk to you, Heather. Thanks very much indeed. We'll have to keep an eye on this story because we can't allow this kind of madness, which it really is, to go on. Don't believe that the campaign should be ban the burqa, says Mac, as that's too easy for the lefties to deflect. Poor women, attack on religion, etc. No, it should be a total ban on face coverings in public areas, unless you have a doctor's certificate to say you need one. That covers both sexes and all religions, i.e. equality, job done. Yeah, because I know, funnily enough, I was talking to somebody just yesterday who said that they should really outlaw some of these kids roaming around on bikes and just generally walking around the streets with their faces covered, wearing those kind of balaclava-type face coverings where you can only see their eyes, and they cover their mouths up, and they cover their heads up, and they might be shoplifters, they might not be, but they shouldn't be covering their faces. You know, you're not allowed to go into a bank with a crash helmet on. You shouldn't be allowed to go into a bank with a burqa or a balaclava, should you? Surely it's the same thing. Let's get a voice note from John.
Morning, Mike. John from London here, mate. Great show as ever. I feel like I'm waking up every day in Groundhog Day. Waking up every day. This Labour government are ruining this country day by day. One thing after another. Can't stand a lot. Want them out. And to think we've got another 4 years. I hope there's something to save by the end of all of this lot.
Yeah. John says he's losing the will to live. I feel your pain, John. I know there's a lot of people that would absolutely and utterly agree with you. Good on Sarah Poachin asking the questions that most want to know but are too afraid to speak up for in case they get a prison sentence, says Fur from Kent. And Mark says this, I think they should go further than banning the burqa. They should ban all face coverings in public so people are identifiable. This might help to get control of all the e-bike scrotes dealing drugs around our towns and cities. Being able to identify them would make prosecutions easier. Absolutely right. I mean, there can be no coincidence that ever since the advent of facial recognition cameras has come in, and I'm not sure that how many of those are actually in operation, that these kids are covering their faces up. Absolutely disgraceful. It's 9:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:40. We'll be here for about another 15 minutes. Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course, coming in to take over from 10 o'clock. On the subject of alcohol and drinking. Dear Mike, says Philip, I had to give up alcohol because I had a weird medical condition. I was not an alcoholic. I just love pubs and a nice tipple, and I miss it like hell. And one from Buddy, who says, nothing wrong with a Jack Daniels before 7, Mike. I have one every morning in my breakfast smoothie. Goodness me. Well, I hope you're not operating any heavy machinery or doing anything that involves you driving anywhere, because that wouldn't be good at all. Here's one from Sean. He says, good morning, Mike. 80 plus years ago tomorrow, many brave men hit the beaches of Normandy. Let's see how many illegals hit our beaches today. How disrespectful of our government. Yeah, I mean, this is the trouble, isn't it? You really can't help think that the beaches of this country, which Churchill vowed to protect and said that we would fight on, have become basically welcome mats for thousands and thousands of people who shouldn't even be here. Extraordinary. Let's talk to Rupert Bell, Talk's royal correspondent, because the Sun today has a big spread on Harry and Meghan. Their latest Let's Have Our Privacy exhibit A would appear to be a rather interesting video, which I'm going to show you now. This is Harry and Meghan dancing in a maternity ward in a hospital. I'm not quite sure which baby this is supposed to be.
Baby mama, this shot's on, been pregnant for way too long. I tell the DJ, turn it off.
If she your baby mom, she gon' do that baby mom.
Work.
She gon' put it on you. She gon' do that baby mom. Drop it down, low. Drop it down, low. Do the baby mama when I step out on the top. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, oh. Hit the baby mama when I'm stepping through the door. Yeah, I'm pregnant, but I got an ill flow. Tryna make some money, buy some huggies from the store. S to the T-A, double R-K, to the E-I-S-H-A. And I don't play, doing my way. Prego, but I'm still doing moves like Beyonce. Yeah, I said I'm pregnant,
twerking. Prince Harry's kind of dad dancing, not quite sure what he's doing, but the Sussexes invade their own privacy again, says the Sun. Very strange piece of video. Let's have a look at Rupert Bell and what he wants to say about it. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
This is even for them, this is a very bizarre video, isn't it?
It's weird, basically. It's to celebrate Lilibet's 4th birthday, because that was supposedly recorded while she was in labour waiting for the birth of Lilibet.
Okay, so this is 4 years old then?
4 years old, because Lilibet has turned 4. But it just seems to me the weirdest thing to put out. I mean, if they're looking at that and think this is clever,
yeah.
I mean, are they stupid or what?
Well, I think they
just think, because it just looks like it's in such poor taste, and yet she thinks that she's a princess and has the right almost to be HRH, although officially not, shouldn't use the title, but has been quietly using it in places. I mean, it's downright awful and weird. Yeah. I mean, I know, look, we probably all got stories of when our children were born that the mothers would probably try and do something. In my case, my wife decided she needed a spicy Indian, and that seemed to work, and out popped Miles. So, there are many ways that people try to encourage. But the last thing I do is be filming my wife eating the Indian. And, it just weird to do this. And if they think they want to have, I don't know what they're trying to prove by this. And then they put out pictures of Lilibet, but it doesn't. You see her half covered. Right. But what you always see is Meghan. So it's all about Meghan again.
It always is all about Meghan.
Well, this is the problem, and this is why I think people get exasperated. And as you mentioned, where's this beloved privacy that they talk about?
Yeah.
That they don't want attention. This is just so attention-seeking.
It is.
It is mind-numbing that they could even think that. But maybe, I don't know what they're trying to prove or what mindset they're in at the moment, but it seems to be a pretty strange one to most normal thinking.
I mean, I'm assuming she and he think this is showing that they're down with the kids, despite the fact that they're massive celebrities and they're incredibly important people. But look at this, just messing about, listening to a rap song by Little Missy or somebody, I don't know who it's by. But there's something a bit odd about the look of her as well. And Isabel Oakeshott said this: there's something really odd about Meghan's bump. Baby bumps are round and extremely smooth, not all bulky and baggy like that. She says, very curious. It is a bit curious, isn't it? I mean, I know different women have different shaped bumps and they can, sometimes be wider or thinner or higher or lower, but it just looks a bit strange, doesn't it?
I'm not really in a position to comment because having not been pregnant, I don't really know. But what she did say recently in a podcast of her, that she put on 65 pounds in each of her pregnancies.
Right.
Well,
that's quite a lot.
Well, that is a substantial amount of weight, but that doesn't, clearly she put weight on, but whether that's 65 pounds, I know not. But it's all part of this does look a bit of a freak show. That's what sort of voyeurism gone wrong, basically, from the thinking that people are going to look at this and go, wow. And Harry just looks sort of slightly strange in the background. Anyway,
he's probably stoned, isn't he?
Well, a whole thing just they keep on doing things that you just go, have you not read the room?
Yeah.
That seems to be the problem. And you don't want to just always be having a pop at them and saying, why now, why now? But they do just seem to put their foot in their mouth on regular moments. And, at the moment we're seeing a bit of Archie and Lilibet, but we never see them. Whereas if you look at the Waleses, when they put out a birthday photograph, they tend to put out a birthday photograph of Charlotte, George or Louis and say, that's it, and make it about them. But instead, what we have is Meghan making it about her. This is all about her. Right. It's not about Lilibet. And this is where you just get, you start wanting to pull your hair out.
I know.
In frustration.
It is very weird because everything that they're now doing seems to be, misfiring. We found out just the other day that it looks like about 700,000 quid is the damage done to the Exchequer for Harry's attempts at trying to get his royal security case fought through. It may well be that he ends up picking up the tab, but at the moment it's the taxpayer that's footing the bill for the defence of that particular story by the Home Office, and meanwhile her podcast goes from bad to worse. She now has decided to disband her jam empire. Nobody's quite sure why. She might start to have again, she might not. She's worried that people might be annoyed because they can't buy the stuff. I mean, it's all just weird. It's incompetent, basically. Because if you're going to launch a business, and her
podcast was interviewing people who had run successful businesses. Well,
Right.
the work some of them put into it, you know, it was real hard graft. It just proves to me that she expects things to just, with a flick of a finger, she will produce a highly successful business. And then she talks about all the heartaches and sleepless nights. You just don't feel that it resonates. And this is just another sort of part of the weird world of Meghan and Harry, and that we are trying to understand and comprehend. I mean, she seems to readily accept awards left, right, and centre. I think she's even supposedly going to be accepting another award next week.
Oh yeah,
on the day of the King's birthday parade for her work in philanthropy, I believe. You know, so there's all sorts of. You know, being philanthropic. I can't say it anyway,
where?
Mike. Over
Well,
to
what
you.
philanthropy has she been doing?
Well, therein lies one of the problems, but it's an award ceremony in Los Angeles. But it may be, you know, so they do seem to love an award to add for their credibility. So the whole thing, you know, if you're going to put out something to celebrate your daughter's birthday, please don't put something out as tacky as that. And I'm afraid there's no other words. It's just downright tacky. Maybe wrong. Maybe some people do like it, but to me, maybe I'm not the generation it's supposed to appeal to. But you know, I think most right-thinking people just think it's the most appallingly bad taste and not befitting of the status of someone who thinks that she should have been an integral member of the royal family.
No, exactly right. Imagine if they still were. That would be an absolute nightmare. Rupert, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Rupert Bell talks royal correspondent. Kamala Tominey from The Telegraph has even said this. Even in my wildest pregnancy moments, I can't imagine twerking like Meghan. Like many mothers, I watched the Sussex's latest Instagram video with gobsmacked astonishment. I think we all did. One from Nick, who says, morning, Mike. I think the Queen would be spinning in her grave if you saw that vile video. These two are off their trolley. Brian says in Worthing, morning, Mike. Looks like Meghan's had a bit too much gas and air. Yeah, I mean, I've seen gas and air, and I've seen it up close, and I've never seen anybody behaving like that as a result. It has to be said. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 10. We've got loads more to do. We've only got another 10 minutes or so to do it in, but it's been quite a fabulous show. Thank you to everybody who's got in touch. If we haven't read your messages out, it's only because we haven't quite managed to reach them, because there's been so much stuff going on. But of course, we will be back after this.
If they all chose and they were allowed to ditch the burqa, not wear anything, but wear just, you can see all their faces, they wear normal clothes. If that happened, would you personally like that?
If that happened, I would be happy because that means that women are given the opportunity to make their own choice. That's the argument I go back to. Ultimately, the argument that Jess is making is ignoring the voices of the actual women that are being affected. You're assuming their position. You're assuming their
not assuming their position
and
at all.
It's completely not evidence-based at all.
I'll tell you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 9:53, very nearly 9:54 actually, so we're nearly right at the end of the show. Earlier on today, of course, we spoke to Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, who for some reason has decided to pick a fight with Liz Truss. Have a listen.
I think the point about the mini-budget back in the back end of 2022, and I'm going to give a speech on this a bit later today, is I think we have to recognise that a mistake was made, and I think we have to be honest about that, because it runs completely counter to where we are as a party when it comes to sorry, I've lost my earpiece now and I've lost you. When it comes as a party, there I can hopefully hear you again. I think I've got you.
Yes.
Yeah, when it comes to fiscal responsibility, which it really has to lie at the heart of the Conservative Party. It's always been in our DNA. And what I'm going to be arguing today, Mike, is that you've got a Labour Party that has completely lost control of our economy fiscally, and people are paying the price. You've got a Reform Party who are dealing and peddling, I'm afraid, fantasy economics, this idea that you can just promise everybody everything and nobody's got to pay for it. It's just nonsense. And really, we need to continue now to establish the Conservative Party as the serious, grown-up party when it comes to fiscal responsibility in the months and the years ahead.
Well, Liz Truss, of course, has responded to some of the things that you've said, and she says that you were one of the Conservative MPs who kowtowed to the failed Treasury orthodoxy and was set on undermining her plan for growth from the moment that she beat your chosen candidate for party leadership. So you've sort of kicked off a bit of an internal struggle inside the Tory party, which surely at this time, when Labour are doing so badly, you don't really need to do you?
Well, I'm not going to get drawn into the he said, she said of this, Mike. The reality
well, you're
is,
already in it, because you started it.
Accept this. Well, no. What I'm talking about is what happened economically rather than anything else, or who did what at what time. The reality is that we lost our mantle for fiscal responsibility as a party at that time, a hard-won position that we had, and we are on the path to firmly regaining that. And I'm also just explaining, as I will do later, why it's so important now that we do that, when we've got a Labour Party which is really completely off the rails when it comes to the economy, and people are suffering as a consequence. And we've got Nigel Farage on the other side. You know, Mike, when he says, oh, I'll take everybody, he says he's earning up to £20,000 out of income tax altogether. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, because that costs, according to the IFS, 50 to 80 billion pounds a year to deliver. That's about a third, getting onto a half of what we spend on the National Health Service and its 1.3 million employees every year. He's given no indication as to how any of that is going to be funded, no realistic indication. And that's just not good enough. And we've got to be the party that stands for, you know, the honesty and integrity, to accept when we've made mistakes, but also to reclaim very firmly that position as the party of fiscal responsibility, who will never do anything that can't be funded and will never risk our economy in the future.
Standing out there in the rain, Mel Stride looking towards us from College Green there. Glenn, on the news that Madame Tussauds will not produce a waxwork of Keir Starmer, says at least the waxwork would have had more personality and probably would have answered a question. How about a voice note from Karen?
Hi, Mike. I wish Madame Tussauds would make a waxworks of Keir Starmer, just make him in the stocks, you know, and then the public, we can all go and throw things at him and get our frustration about how bad this government really is. That would be great fun, don't you think? Great show, Mike.
I certainly might get a bit of a cue forming for that sort of behaviour. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Very good morning.
Very good morning. I thought Keir Starmer was a waxwork.
Well,
by the way,
how
I
could you better it?
I was wrong about the bloke who was most unhappy at standing behind Rachel Reeves yesterday, wasn't I? Because it wasn't the bloke in blue; it was the bloke on the other side.
It was the guy to the right. Yeah.
Oh, why do they do that to people?
I know. Somebody said to me today they've picked it up from America, where they like to do that sort of. Americans look a lot happier though.
But you want to have people who look happy.
Yes, it's meant to be like
you're
a
a big
pep
supporter.
rally.
Yes, then
yeah.
It's
like a pep rally, so everyone's kind of going rah rah every
but
time
usually
they
those
speak.
people are bussed in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Well, it was a bus factory.
If our employer said, I want you to stand behind and look respectful when a politician is making a speech, I'd be like, I don't think so. I'm
Imagine if
hiding
they
in
did
the
it
loop.
here. Imagine if they did it here and somebody came in and you had to stand behind them. You wouldn't.
There's no politician I would stand behind without making faces.
No.
Sorry. And even the ones I would vote for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's entirely mad, isn't it?
Bizarre, isn't it?
But it's even more bonkers. Is I mean,
they're just so bad at all of it. They're bad at policy. They're bad at presentation. They're bad at thinking of it. They've got no plans. Everything they announce is something the Tories were going to do, which we didn't agree with anyway. Or, I mean, it's tragic.
It really is tragic.
What do you make of the free school meals plan? I mean, I'm just paying for other people's kids again.
Well, we don't need to.